Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regular meeting of Fernie City Council held on, on July 8th, 2025. Kisukukit. We acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of Yakutat Nucleate First Nation. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakutat Nucleate and are members of Ktunaxa-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. I will call the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. And just a note for council, we have a fairly weighty agenda this evening, and some items, and we can discuss it when we get into them, but we may want to table them for this meeting because we want to have the most fulsome discussion possible, particularly on item 6.3. With that, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the following recommendation that the agenda of the July 8th, 2025 regular council meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Nixon, seconded by Councillor Shoesmith. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. And item 4.1, a mover and a seconder for the following staff recommendation that the minutes of the June 24th, 2025 regular meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Nixon, seconded by Councillor Audie Kelly. Is there any discussion? I did want to point out one thing in those minutes. I think the public input period around the annual municipal report shows as before approval of the report, but in fact it was after approval of the report. So thank you. We can make that. So I'll amend the recommendation that the minutes of the June 24th, 2025 regular meeting be adopted as amended. Moved by Councillor Nixon, seconded by Councillor Audie Kelly. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. I'll now open the floor to public participation and invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit. A speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes, and speakers are asked to state their full name and a community of residence when they arrive at the podium or on the microphone. And we do have, for anyone wishing to speak, we do have a time clock here that will record your or let you know where you are in your 3 minutes. So please give that a glance. So I'll first turn to the gallery and see if anybody would like to speak. I think actually we have a couple of folks signed up.
Yes, Your Worship. Your Worship, we have first up is Brad Cox.
Welcome.
Hello, Council. Thank you. My name is Brad Cox. I'm a lifelong resident of Fernie and the Vice President of Fernie Minor Baseball. I'm here to speak on what agenda number is the baseball?
It's included in item 6.3 on the fire hall.
Okay, so yeah, 6.3, the impact that it's going to have on using the Cervello field for the fire hall. We're in our second year of bringing baseball back to Fernie, and we've averaged 150 children, which is quite an accomplishment. And we'd like to continue those numbers and possibly grow if that is possible. Removing that field without a plan to go forward is going to have a very negative impact on our growth. We are currently situated down in the James White Park. That's the airport park, correct? Mm-hmm. There's two fields down there. There's a minor league small field and then a full baseball field. It's very ideal for our situation because we can store all our equipment in one location. And we have one city-owned rental shed. Moving to the different locations, such as Ridgemont, I believe is what I read is another possibility, is just going to double our cost, which is going to put a big impact our growth as an organization. We have to rent more sheds. We have to double our equipment. And if the ball diamonds spread out, then that just increases further and further. The Ridgemont field is okay for T-ball. It's kind of at about a 4%, 5% slope. So the balls will be running towards the third base side of the field, but that's not the issue. The little kids can play on it. I do have a problem with the field. When the balls hit the turf, it bounces in odd directions, right? Which as soon as the kid takes the ball in the face, he's going to not want to play that sport anymore. It is part of the game, but that field does need some work. I also heard that there was an option to expand the minor league ballpark into a major league style park. Just so council is aware, that's going to require a full rebuild. The backstop is not of adequate size. The dugouts are for children, not for adult players. And so it would be a full rebuild. I'm not sure if that is an economic way to go about it. Right. And then as a taxpayer and a lifelong resident, I fully understand the need of a fire hall, right? But I do struggle with tearing down infrastructure that's already there. It happens, right? It's going to happen to the outdoor skating rink. It's going to happen to the dirt jump park. It's going to happen to the ball field. Our taxes are high, and I don't want them to go at the rate they're going up. It's going to drive a lot of people out of the town.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Appreciate your feedback, and we will consider that feedback at item 6.3.
All right. Thank you.
Next, your worship, is Courtney Baker.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's like being at work. My name is Courtney Baker, 952 6th Avenue. I'm here to speak to two items on the agenda today. First, with the Executive Director for Pride and our item that's underneath correspondence and a request for in-kind. I just would really like to stress that we are grateful for the support that the city has always given us. This year, now more than ever, it seems like it's more important. I know it's outside of our normal request through the Heritage Canada grant. We did not apply for that grant this year. We were asking for the same level of support through in-kind services. This year, certainly we get the feedback, or I see the feedback. We do have increased online hate and homophobia and discrimination pressed against us. So I think really the municipality getting behind these visible signs of support for marginalized communities, in this case, the 2S LGBTQ+ community, is critical for the community, especially now. I mean, even today, there's comments about crosswalks and rainbow crosswalks and all these fun things and how bad they are. So it certainly is an underlying element that's in the community. The more visible support that the city can put towards it is very appreciated by residents and visitors, and goes a long way. Even though it only seems like a small token, it really impacts people when they are able to see a rainbow or see some colored lights or whatever it is. So thank you for considering that request. Okay, a minute and 40 seconds left. Moving on to the second one, purely as a citizen, I wanted to speak to the discretionary grants and the potential that they would possibly be removed from consideration as for going on, which was in the staff report, or the continuation of the discretionary grants. They're critical for small community groups. These $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 inputs really allow them to actually get projects done. The groups that often apply do not have access to other larger sources of funding, such as the Senior Center does, or any of the other more established, larger, broader based community groups. I know this year less than half was given out, partly because of the eligibility criteria, which is restrictive. So just when you're discussing this, I just would really like to stress the importance of the continuation, especially for these small groups like Kinder Gym, who need $1,500 to commit to complete a project that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do, or I don't know, trying to think, the Ghost Rider Adventure Camp and all these other groups that Not that they rely on it. I know that's not the point of the funding, but it really helps them meet their goals and keep the community vibrant and accessible, especially because the bulk of these programs are free to access and are barrier free as well for community members. So thank you. Just like to put that input in there.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. I'll turn to Ms. Rhodes. Anybody online indicated a desire to speak? No, seeing none. We shall move on to item number 6 and the following staff recommendation. I'll need a mover and a seconder that council enter into committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Ramadas, seconded by Councillor Audia Kelly. Bless you. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. We're now in committee of the whole. Take my jacket off, Corey. The first item, as it was just mentioned, discretionary grants fund review report from our Deputy Director of Finance. Oh, 6.2. Oh, sorry, have I missed one? Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize, Wendy.
You said I was
It is often difficult to follow the agenda as printed. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. Item 6.1, Chamber-led economic development strategy and funding requests for 2026. Presentation from the Executive Director of the Fernie Chamber of Commerce. My apologies.
No offense taken. Mayor and Council, thank you for having me here today. I'd like to start off by asking for a request for an additional 5 minutes just to make sure that I can get through all of the material. It's a pretty full package.
Moved by Councillor McIsaac, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Any discussion? All those in favor? You have an extra 5 minutes.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. So again, Wendy McDougall from the Fernie Chamber of Commerce. So okay, thank you. So I'm here tonight to propose a fee-for-service agreement between the City of Fernie and the Chamber of Commerce, one that would support a Fernie-focused economic development role based at the Chamber beginning in 2026. We've approached you in the past, somewhat last minute, so this time we're here proactively, well in advance of the budget process. Our proposal is a strategic and cost-effective way to deliver targeted, community-based economic development, driven by local needs, informed by business insight, and coordinated by the city's broader goals. The Chamber is well positioned to lead this work. We already have relationships, we're connected to the business community, and we have a strategic capacity to move forward. This proposal is about formalizing a partnership, one that the city retains influence, the Chamber does the legwork, and Fernie benefits from consistent, coordinated economic development year over year. So often we've been asked, what is economic development? So it's more than just growth. It's about making intentional choices to improve Fernie's long-term well-being. That includes supporting local businesses, attracting investment, creating job opportunities, and planning for the future. It helps us respond proactively to economic shifts like upswings in tourism, cyclical nature of natural resources, and sector diversification to reduce over-reliance on one sector. Local examples include the City of Fernie's new childcare facility, the base camp development, tourism events like this weekend's gravel grind, and new sector diversification in neighboring communities like Canal Flats, Kelowna, and Salmon Arm. These all build resilient, diverse economies for today and in the future. Having a designated economic development function is critical because this is often the work that gets pushed to the side of a desk and doesn't get prioritized. It's strategic, it's long-term work, and because it doesn't deliver immediate results, it often doesn't get the attention it deserves. That's part of why it's hard to explain. It's not flashy or reactive, it's forward-thinking, and the benefits show over time. A helpful way to think about this is like a marathon. You don't see results on day one, and you won't be ready after a week. But if you don't put in the work, when race day comes, you won't be ready. The same is true for our community. If we don't plan for economic sustainability, we'll feel it when we're facing challenges and we aren't prepared for it. The good news is that when we are already doing a lot of the work, but we can do it more effectively under a formalized model like other communities. So a quick step back, economic development is not a new idea to the city of Fernie. It's contemplated in the 2024 official community plan and recognized as a pillar of Fernie's long-term vision. The plan outlines several directions, including working with the Chamber of Commerce. It also includes a clear recommendation to explore the creation of an economic development officer or staff position, recognizing that the work required is dedicated capacity to move things forward in a meaningful way. The OCP also connects economic development to other core community priorities like transportation, housing, childcare, and historic downtown revitalization to retain and attract local businesses. Finally, the plan emphasizes the importance of regional collaboration, particularly in the Elk Valley. You did receive a presentation last October for the RDEK Regional Economic Development Service Bylaw, which aimed to establish a shared economic development position across the Elk Valley communities. We appreciate your support of the initiative. However, we do recognize that without full buy-in from the Elk Valley partners, it's unlikely to move forward. And discussions around this approach have been ongoing since 2023. At that same meeting, we introduced the concept of what we're discussing today, which is a Fernie-specific program. So on the other hand, economic development is at the forefront of the Chamber's strategic plan. It's not only one of our 5 core strategic priorities, but it is designated as an integrated priority, which means that it runs through all aspects of our work. It's also aligned with our mission, which is to sustainably strengthen the local economy and quality of life in Fernie. Much like the OCP, the Chamber's strategic direction also prioritizes housing and business supports as key drivers. The Chamber is well positioned and prepared to deliver this work with a focused, strategic, and community-based way. So we've looked at different economic development models and funding streams throughout the province. What is consistent is that the core funding is a mix of municipal and regional district funding, and it's enhanced with project-based funding. What we've seen is that without core funding and solely relying on grant funding, it lacks consistency and long-term focus. Most resort municipalities have established managed models in place: Revelstoke, Golden, Osoyoos, Roslyn, Whistler, Sun Peaks, Tofino, and Invermere. A few provincial examples I wanted to pull from were Slocan Valley. So even though they have a really small population, they've had an economic development coordinator since 2018, and they've been recognized for their contributions. Cranbrook has a municipal staff member, and they've recently received an award for their Choose Cranbrook economic development website. And in Creston, they have a designated role, and what she was able to accomplish was 3 grants through the READY grant, which equaled $1.6 million. So what I'd like to do now is just walk you through one example of what a service agreement might look like. So that's the one in Columbia Valley. So that was established in 2017, and it is funded by the RDEK bylaw, and it services the Columbia Valley communities. It's guided by an advisory committee that meets quarterly, and it's delivered by the Columbia Valley Chamber, which is what we're proposing as well. They receive roughly $80,000 annually, and it's structured by a bylaw, strategic plan, annual work plan. And what they do is they present to council annually to approve the priorities of the work plan. Right now, they're working on sector development, which is film, alternative energy sources, workforce development, and supporting workforce housing. So you've all got this in your package. Their 3 strategic priorities are listed there, and then their work plan is underneath. And then they've highlighted some of their key successes over the last year. The next slide highlights what the Fernie Chamber is already working on to show the similarities and how this would work really well together, or using this example or this agreement. And this slide is to show what the possibilities are. So this is examples of work plan items from other communities that have undertaken economic development. With more funding and dedicated capacity, we can expand on these efforts, move more quickly, and complete projects more efficiently. So it's not about reinventing the wheel, but it's about building on the foundation that we already have. A lot of these initiatives are already being covered by the City of Fernie and the Chamber of Commerce, but a lot of them aren't. And so we need a designated role to do these. For example, physician recruitment, food security, transportation is on a lot of our lists, but there's not one core organization that's pursuing that. And sector development is very popular amongst our neighboring communities. As I mentioned, Canal Flats, Kelowna, and Salmon Arm are all getting into the innovation and technology sectors. We are a resource-based community, and it's not too early to start proactively exploring sector development. However, this kind of transition requires long-term focus, dedicated capacity, and strategic investment. So here's what a Fernie-centric economic development plan would look like. So I've used the 3 strategic priorities and added a 4th at the end, and then put our work items under each of those headings. Having to do a business walk and participate in the OCP this year will provide us valuable insight of what future work plan items could look like as well. Okay, so here's the steps that would be required to put this into a service agreement. So present the strategic plan and the work plan, which we've done here today, but we're open to feedback and refinement by the advisory committee. Step 2 would be to form an advisory committee. So in our scenario, that would be made up of members of council, senior staff, chamber, and chamber board members. 3, the chamber is happy to draft a formal service agreement, relying on some examples from our neighbors. And once in place, the agreement would allow for quarterly check-ins and annual presentation to council to approve the work plan prioritization. All of this, of course, is subject to securing multi-year funding and support, which is why we're here tonight. So why the chamber is the best to lead this work? We're already doing a lot of this work. We're connected with people. We advocate for businesses. We're building partnerships and responding to economic changes. What we're missing is the capacity to fully focus and expand these efforts. That's where the service agreement would make a real difference. We're neutral, unbiased, business-friendly organization able to work across sectors while advocating for the broader community. And economic development would be our primary focus, not one of many. We have a strong track record from transitioning out of co-working, less hands-on involvement in events like Grizz Days, and our current participation in the visitor center transition shows that we can do complex community challenges and deliver results. So what are the benefits? The return on investment on economic development is measurable and lasting. First and foremost, it increases the city's commercial tax base. More businesses and healthier businesses mean more revenue without putting additional pressure on residential taxes. There are only so many expenses in the budget that can be reduced without affecting service levels, so let us help you increase the revenue side of the equation. It also supports many of the city's strategic priorities found in the OCP, like housing and revitalization of downtown. The work will help retain jobs, attract new residents, and strengthen the overall economy, all things that benefit Fernie's livability and resilience, which is part of Council's strategic plan. It also ensures that city has timely, accurate business data gathered through business walks and direct engagement to help guide further decisions and prioritize economic development. There's also important economic issues that are not currently being addressed. As I mentioned, the physician recruitment, proactive business attraction, and sector development. A coordinated economic development function ensures that we don't miss out on these critical opportunities. Okay, so this slide highlights why economic development isn't just good for business, it's essential for Fernie's long-term financial health. Right now, BC businesses pay nearly 3 times more in taxes than residents. When we grow the business base, we help spread the tax load more evenly, which reduces pressures on homeowners. Attracting and retaining businesses increase revenue without raising rates. A strong commercial tax base means more funds for services, infrastructure, and livability, and more sustainability in years ahead. This is about smart planning, not just reaching reacting to changes, but setting Fernie up to thrive. Okay, so this slide is going to take a bit of explanation. So we've talked about balancing the tax base previously. So I went and found the provincially available data. Specifically, this is the municipal tax rate and tax burden. So this is available for all BC municipalities. I took the 14 resort municipalities as a sample size. You could look at anything. You can go down a rabbit hole. You can look at Sparwood and Elkford and get lost in it all day. But the goal was to see how we compare to other communities of similar tourism-based. So the first chart in green shows that the proportion of tax rate revenue that comes from resident properties in each RMI community. Fernie is near middle at 59%, while several communities place significantly more burden on resident taxpayers like Kimberley and Rossland, while others are more balanced like Tofino and Revelstoke. While Fernie's rate is higher than ideal, we are basically in the middle. The second chart, which is in black, shows the commercial tax rate. So Fernie's commercial tax rate represents about 8% of the assessed value. Notably, communities like Kimberley and Revelstoke charge much higher rates, while Osoyoos and Sun Peaks are considerably lower. We are not suggesting that we increase the commercial tax rate. However, commercial activity is noticeably low compared to our peers, which is the next slide. So in blue, this shows that Fernie's business class contributes only 15% of total municipal tax revenue, which is low compared to our peers. Other resorts like Tofino are at 48%, Revelstoke's at 39%, Ucluelet at 37%, and Golden at 35%. This makes a significant difference when businesses pay almost 3 times what residents do. So there's a lot you could take away from these, but what we're trying to say is that the Fernie commercial sector is underdeveloped relative to its peers. Increasing the number and the value of commercial properties would help shift the tax burden off residents, taxpayers. A strong business community would diversify the local tax base, increase revenue, and improve municipal financial resilience, all of which are key to economic development. As I said, this is just a snapshot. A dedicated economic development role, working in collaboration with the city, could take a much deeper dive, identifying the right opportunities, attracting the right types of businesses, and help balancing the tax base over time. So that's a lot of information. I'm not sure if I did do that in my allotted time or not. But what I want to leave you with is that this isn't just another line item, expense item on the budget. It's an investment in Fernie's future, one that will pay for itself many times over through increased revenue, stronger local businesses, and more stable financial future for Fernie. If not now, when? The role was identified in 2014 in the OCP, but actions have continuously been delayed by previous council, and Fernie can't afford to wait any longer. The Chamber is now well positioned to lead this work. We already have the relationships, the business insight, and the strategic capacity. That's why we're proposing a fee-for-service model here today. We can deliver targeted, community-based economic development on behalf of the city in coordination in an effective way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Questions from council? Observations? I have a couple. The statement that Fernie's business sector is underbuilt compared to similar towns. Can you provide me an example of what that looks like? And so if we were, so what is the comparator community and how would Fernie be different?
So on that chart, it's the blue one. It's basically showing that only 15% of our commercial tax is coming, the overall tax is coming from commercial businesses. If we had more, we could grow. We see closed businesses on Main Street, and we haven't done a lot of sector diversification like other ones have. This presentation sort of afforded me the opportunity to look into some of them, and Canal Flats is a really great example of being forced to look for alternative sectors. So when the mill closed, they had to look to diversify and be reactive.
Mhm.
We had the opportunity to think about that ahead of time. We're heavily reliant on the mine, and part of our taxation does come from the mine share tax.
Mhm.
If that were to go away, we'd be in a real problem.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. No, I just needed some clarification about what exactly that meant.
Yeah, we haven't seen a lot of growth or new businesses. I think we've used the example before when they built the big Komatsu in Sparwood. We didn't put a bid in for that. We're not actively doing business attraction. So I get phone calls. Somebody would like to open a laundromat. We don't have a commercial hub that shows what commercial space we have available, where it could go. I think we've all been contacted by a baker in town that would like to set up, but we don't have the resources to help them. And recently we've been approached by a business in town that's a chain that would like to make a case to expand, but we don't have the data to support that business.
Thank you. Councillor Ramada.
Thanks, Your Worship. This is a comprehensive presentation. Thanks for this. Lots of good information. I just was wondering, where did this $60,000 ask come from? Like, is there a reason why you are asking for that specific amount?
Yeah, so that would partially fund a role. So we're not asking for the full funding. The other portion would come from the chamber. So it is, you would get a full value of somebody for less cost. So we are willing to take on part of that.
Further?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you. That's good context here, Wendy. Another question I had was, I understand there were a lot of examples here from other communities. Can you just paint a picture of, some other community where they actually went intentionally with economic development? After the fact, what was the level of economic development that happened in that town versus previous? Like, is there a before and after scenario that you have here?
Not that one that I could think about. Revelstoke comes to mind for me. They do have an organization. I think they've got 4 employees there. So we're not significantly different in size, but we've seen them grow and be a bit more proactive about that growth and thoughtfulness in it. We do economic development. I don't want to come here and say that we're not doing it, but if you think of some of the items that have happened, they're a bit, they're inbound rather than being proactive. So the childcare is amazing, and that's definitely something that we needed. But we probably need a long-term stay hotel. We're not proactively saying, here's a plot of land, we'll take expressions of interest. What could you put there? Places like Squamish are doing that. So they've got a plot of land and they're taking bids for it, and they'll pick the best one.
And your Columbia Valley example, do they have sort of an ROI from their work? Have they been able to sort of express the value that they brought to the Columbia Valley?
They do. They've done a newsletter recently, and they've got some statistics in that, and I'd be happy to share that.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
It's a really hard thing to explain, but it's so important because it's very long-term focused, and it's not like opening a store and the markup on a retail item. It's hard to articulate that, but you can tell in communities where they've been thoughtful in it and managed it well.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions, or Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Worship. I totally get it. I mean, the diversification would be fantastic for our community, but I'm just like, are we poised for that? Do we have, it's a chicken and egg thing. Do we have the services? Do we have the healthcare? Do we have the housing for the people? It's just like, so it just kind of makes me nervous at the same time, putting taxpayer dollars into a program and then, but not being ready for it as a community. And I don't know when do you say when? And it's like, exactly like you said in your presentation. So I'm just debating. And one of the questions I had was the Elk Valley Economic Initiative. Is that, the status of that is still going and stuff like that as well? It's like, do we?
It is.
Yeah.
I would say that's a good example of relying on grant funding and not having that core funding. So we kind of jump from grant to grant and do ad hoc projects. Whereas this base funding would allow us to take a 30,000 view and say, what do we need to do? It is a really core function that I think every municipality should have, and whether it's housed at the chamber or somewhere else. So Creston's another example. They awarded it to Kootenai Employment Services. It could go there too, or it could go to the chamber, or it could be a municipal staff member. What we're offering at this fee for service is to share the cost in that, and it would be a lot less than hiring another staff member. But it is important enough that we've seen it get pushed to the side of a desk enough times.
Further?
Thank you.
Councillor Ravenous.
Thanks, Your
Oh.
Worship.
I apologize. Councillor Adi Kelly, I jumped the queue. I apologize.
No worries, Your Worship. I just wanted to lend a little bit of support to what Councillor Nixon was saying, because I was thinking along those lines as well. And also our strategic priority renewal and the discussions that we've been having around that, you know, the mentions of, well, we have this plot of land. Well, we haven't gotten that far. So I think we have to do some building blocks in some ways.
Thank you. Councillor Ravenous and then Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to, like, you're almost teaching the choir here, Wendy. Like, we all get it. Like, economic development is important. I think in many of our own conversations at the council table, we have identified it as a priority. Maybe it is not formally documented somewhere. We get what you're saying. I think at the end of the day, two things come to my mind that we need to figure out collectively here. One is, what's the capacity to absorb this type of function, be it within the city or in the community? And the second thing is the elephant in the room. Where do we find that $60,000? If we support this, it has to come at the cost of something else, and that we need to figure out. Just wanted to put it out there, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. The ask was for 3 years, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also of two minds on this here, being a little business fellow myself. It is a chicken and egg thing, you know, what draws them here, what makes them grow here. And for me to be in support, because I mean, on the one hand, I can see a concrete, this is a bit more than over 0.5 point increase in tax over that period of time, which is a concrete real thing. You know, I've got to see the tangible concrete benefits of that as well. You know, like exactly how will this translate into somebody who otherwise wouldn't have started a business and hiring people doing that, or, you know, bringing an existing business in, like concretely. Because I don't want to look back at the end of the 3 years here and say, so we've created a position for somebody and they've taken our money and nothing's come out of it. I mean, I don't think anybody likes that. So I in principle, I kind of like it, but I do need to kind of have a clearer understanding of exactly how this will translate into new or more business.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I guess I'd like to speak in favor, and speaking more specifically to Councillor Nixon's point, that I think one of the big advantages of economic development is not only can it identify the opportunity in advance, but it can identify the shortcomings in advance. You know, we've recently had a proposal come to this table where we had a shortfall in our community that will prevent that proposal as it was presented from going forward, that we were unaware of. So we can't do too many of those. That will become a problem for investment in our community. So I think that's a big advantage here of having somebody whose job it is to do the forward look for the opportunity and at the same time identifying the necessities that the community needs to provide in order to take advantage of those. We have a very thin bench here. We don't have anybody who's got a corner of their desk free to do this. So I think the chamber is well positioned to do it. I think this is a good opportunity. Having said that, I do have a question for Ms. McDougall, and that is, at the end of 3 years, what would you regard as a measure of success?
If you want to renew it for another 3 years,
That's a fair answer, actually.
I think 3 years is a good amount of time to see how we're doing. Columbia Valley started theirs in 2017 and it continuously gets renewed. And they're now looking at sector development in film. That's not probably how they started out, but they've kind of tackled those immediate challenges first, and now they can get to the next ones. Without this position, I'm worried we're not going to get to those next ones and we're going to be in dire straits. And just to go back a bit to Councillor Adia Kelly, I don't think we're going to start off with an expression of interest, but that's somewhere we could get to. And by creating this advisory committee, the priorities will be set by council and senior staff and the chamber. And those are the things that we're going to work on. But we're never going to get to that state or look at the land inventory unless we create capacity and time to do that.
Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a bunch of thoughts and questions that have kind of already been asked, but I do want to go back to Councillor McIsaac's question about, how do we define success in 3 years' time? Because as I've heard from my fellow councillors, there is a bit of gun shyness is maybe not quite the right expression, but investing in a program that just becomes a perpetual money draw without knowing what the results that we're getting from. So I am a little bit challenged to support this without having kind of a clear goal for that 3-year timeline that isn't just putting more money into it. Having said all that, I also know that we're not going to do anything if we don't invest in it. And, if we're happy with the current state of the commercial sector, the industrial sector in our community, then let's just keep doing what we've been doing. But if we want to see it grow, if we want to see new revenue streams as a municipality from the increased tax base, we need to figure out how we can invest into growing that. It's not just going to happen on its own. So I'm not sure if you have a more concrete answer to the first question. But that is something that I would really want to see. And just because we set ourselves a goal doesn't mean we need to attain it. Shoot for the stars, land on the moon. It's still a great outcome, sort of thing. But if we don't go in with clear goals, with clear KPIs or whatever other business moniker acronym we want to use, we're not going to achieve anything.
Yeah, I think that's where the work plan comes into play and KPIs and benchmarks and quarterly check-ins to see how we're doing. I see it kind of as a job interview. We're asking you to hire us and it's our performance review at the end of the year. So how do we measure up? That's why we're proposing a collaboration. And I think the advisory committee could work very well because then we're all working on it. And if we don't see progress somewhere, then we pivot or, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. McDougall. There's a few more councillors in the queue here, but I just a clarifying question. I think it's contextually important, and I think reflecting on an earlier comment Councillor Ramirez made, this is an ask to consider this for the 2026 budget. And so it's not an ask to endorse it today. It's an ask that it be on the table and be considered amongst all the other priorities that we will discuss during our 2026 budget deliberations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
We'd love an answer sooner and we could start working on an agreement and be ready to hit the ground running in 2026. But yeah, that is correct.
Thank you. I just wanted to ensure that was clear. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. I actually just wanted to let you know that Councillor Hamilton had his hand up was all. But seeing as you've called on me, this is something I am broadly in favor of, but I would like some more concrete meat on the bones here kind of thing before I proceed. So yeah, if I'm still in one of these chairs in 3 years' time or 4 years' time, I guess it would be, I definitely have some harder questions about like, what did we do? But thank you.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. That was the context behind my earlier question, Wendy, when I said there was like in some of these communities, there was an intentional program put in place. How much of the economic development happened afterwards was just natural course of growth in those communities versus how much did this program itself provide? Like that will be a look back for us. Like we don't have to wait for next 3 years to see the outcome of this program. If there is some kind of a data validation coming from another town, that would be helpful for our own understanding. So we don't have to wait for another 3 years for this program to proceed. You know
So an example would be in Columbia Valley, they've created the Columbia Valley Housing Society. So they saw housing as a need, and through this group, they created a society to pursue housing needs in their own community. That came directly out of this group, and the economic development officer, Teresa, is leading that work with the executive director at the chamber. So that's one example. Yeah. I think depending on what the work plan is, you'll see it happened or it didn't happen, depending on what we send. But I can go away and find some KPIs or how you would measure the success at the end of the terms that would form part of the agreement. We'll do that anyways.
Thank you. Councillor Heidi Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, same for me. I was just wondering if you came across anything like example, yes, Cranbrook won an award for their Choose Cranbrook website, but did they bring any business to town? What % did they increase their business tax revenue by? Are there examples like that you've ran across at all? Because that to me would be like, not to denigrate what anyone else has done, but using the example of they formed a housing society. Do they have land? Have they gotten a build? You know, like those types of things. Like, I guess I'm kind of looking for, I think it was Councillor Shoesmith that said meat, but like tangible
Case studies.
tangible results. Like what did they actually get out of it? That's where I know that it is a bit hard to define. I just wondered if you had run across any actual, okay, we went from 15% to 20% with business tax revenue.
On the spot, I can't think of that at the moment. I can see who's doing well and why, but I can't pinpoint when that exactly started as a result of economic development. When you look at the charts, I like to look at Revelstoke. I think they're doing quite well. They're balanced. But if you look at Kimberley, they don't have economic development. They have a really high taxation on their residential tax, and they're pretty low on the commercial tax. And they don't have funding, but they are going grant to grant to grant and trying to solve that. They're also reliant on natural resources and trying to diversify. So I think we're a bit ahead of the curve, and I don't want to be in that position. So that's why we're bringing it forward today.
That's a very good point. Kimberley could be a very instructive example because the Sullivan mine was closing for years. They knew it was closing for years. And really didn't start to diversify until it was closed. And it's taken them some time, and maybe as evidenced by the chart you showed, that it's taken them some time to change gears, if you will.
Yeah, Canal Flats is another great example of that. When the mill closed, they didn't have a plan. Then they brought in an economic development officer who created a strategic plan, and then they did business attraction. So now they've got this innovation and they've got all these tech guys in one building, and they waived the commercial tax for a certain number of years to attract businesses. So that cost the municipality something in the short term to attract businesses in the long term. So that might be another good example of how it increased taxation.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton, is your hand still up or is it up again?
It's up again.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Forgive me if I missed it in the report and the presentation, but all of these other communities that have ECDEV officers or economic development positions, whether it's, you know, the Columbia Valley as a region, how are all those positions being funded? Or is it through taxation? Or, and I know you don't want to be chasing grants because that's kind of the challenge that we've faced in the past, but I'm just curious what their, excuse me, what their model for funding the role is.
Yeah, so I did cover that, but very briefly. Sometimes it's a municipal staff role or it's outsourced. Often it is an RD sort of area based. We did try that. We presented that last October. And as I mentioned, unless we get our Elk Valley partners on side with us, I don't see that going forward. That was presented or started in 2023 or before then. And I don't think it really meets the needs that Fernie needs. So we'd be sharing one person between Sparwood and Elkford, and our needs are different than theirs. So that's why we've proposed the sort of shared model between the chamber for a Fernie-centric position.
Thank you. I'm curious, did the other chambers, like Elkford and Sparwood chambers, support the regional initiative here? Because I know there was a stumbling block at the municipal level.
So I don't think it passed in Sparwood, but I think it did pass in Elkford, and it would have to be unanimous for it to go forward. But maybe the CAO has further information?
No, that you're right. That would have to pass at the board table for the regional district. I was just curious whether the chambers were on side, even if they're municipal.
Yeah, sorry, they
Municipalities,
were
right.
supportive of it. They're both relatively new in their roles and would welcome any type of support.
Yeah, thank you.
It is also a form of taxation if it is through the RD
yeah.
versus the municipality. It's
Thank you. Other questions, comments from council? Have I missed anybody? Councillor McIsaac and then Councillor Ramirez.
Good thing I had a long pause there and started talking. Thank you. It is interesting. I was just thinking about your story with your worship with what happened in Kimberley, and it is another good example of how difficult it is to get communities to invest until they have no other choice. And it is interesting too in economic development that, you know, the results are often revealed in the absence as opposed to the presence. I was thinking of that quote from, I think it's John Wanamaker about marketing, spending that he knew 50% of his marketing dollars are wasted. He just didn't know which 50%. And I feel it's a little bit like that with economic development too. The investment, it's very difficult to tell what's being successful at the time, but you know that what's not being successful if you're not investing in it. My question for Ms. McDougall was, you mentioned that as a collaboration between the city and the chamber, and I'm wondering, for the investment on the chamber side, are you looking to grants or are your members believers? Are they financially committed to supporting this role?
I think it already fits within our strategic priorities, and we've seen more support of the business community behind the chamber recently for the direction that we're going. All of economic development would be to support them. We've got the Downtown Business Working Group, which is grant funded, and the workforce housing, which we hope to present in September. So I think it just lines up so well with what we're already doing. If we had more capacity and the funding to do it, then we could do more of this type of work and rely less on events and running visitor centers and that sort of thing.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Roberts?
Thanks, Your Worship. I will stick my neck out and say that I'm willing to take a small bet on this. As we have discussed so far, we can go into a rabbit hole here. There are many optionalities. We can always debate around whether this will be successful or not. Of course, we need some hard data for sure, but I'm also kind of wary of signing a check for 3 years, $60,000 in perpetuity, like Hamilton mentioned there. So if there is some kind of a middle ground here where we commit to a smaller portion, and I understand this is not today's commitment, it is coming through the 2026 budget, but even as an initial payment for this one, I would be happy to support anything that is like a smaller bet where we see how the program progresses. And if we have, like, say, a year or two down the line, we have tremendous amount of success, we can start thinking about increasing our funding. Like that's the model and approach that I would be more comfortable supporting, rather than, just writing a blank check for a longer period of time.
Yeah, fair enough. Councillor McKay?
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure about the blank check part, but since the ask is essentially for us to consider a 3-year commitment for this money in our 2026 budget, I wonder if it would be appropriate at this time to make a motion to have staff bring that forward as part of the budget and ask the chamber to present us with more of the data that some of the other councillors sitting around the table are looking for in advance of that discussion. So we could have a more fulsome discussion at that time. So this would not be committing us the money, but it would be committing that it would come to the table for the budget discussion. And that would give some time for the chamber to perhaps provide more hard data. So.
Yeah, that's sort of where my head goes, and not unlike Councillor Ramadas's comment about given that we have more hard data potentially at that time, then we can do that winnowing of priorities and decide, how much money is going where, which is the whole entire budget process, of course. Mr. Bornowski, you were going to comment to that?
If I can, the corporate officer and I have been checking in with each other just on process, and you may want to check with the corporate officer. You're in committee of the whole, so you can't actually advance city business like approving budget.
Yeah.
And nor would I recommend that you approve a budget ask in June without understanding the pressures that you're facing or having set guidelines for your next year's budgetary pressures. But I do believe that between the corporate officer and I, we've started a potential resolution that you might want to discuss that's in line with what Councillor McIsaac is suggesting.
Yeah, I think the ask, and I think where Councillor McIsaac was going was, as I said earlier, that this just come back to the budget discussion. And my head went exactly where yours did. Gives the chamber time to provide more hard data, more case studies, and then, it can receive due consideration at that time. But that would be business we would advance outside of committee. So, yeah. Anything else? Councillor Smith, you had your hand up. Oh, no. I checked the screen to make sure you weren't going to tell me Councillor Hamilton had his hand up. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you, Ms. McDougall. That was very instructive. I appreciate the presentation.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please, if we can hear what,
We're all on the
Yeah.
same page. So the optional recommendation for committee consideration is that committee directs staff to work with the Fernie Chamber of Commerce to prepare a proposal for consideration by council as part of the initial 2026 budget discussion this fall.
my immediate reaction to that, the way it's written, is that I would just like staff to create space for this in the budget discussion, and that, forgive me, the work in terms of the background work comes from the chamber. So the way you phrased it, I think direct staff to work with the chamber. I think staff be better prepared to receive information from the chamber that would inform the discussion at the budget table. Absolutely. Please.
That committee directs staff to include information from the Fernie Chamber of Commerce to prepare a proposal for consideration by council as part of the initial 2026 budget discussion this fall. Does that read well? That committee directs staff to receive information from the Fernie Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that works. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry?
What about creating space?
Yeah, if they receive information as part of the budget discussion, yeah. Yeah. No, good question. Good clarification. Moved by Councillor McIsaac. Oh,
So,
Councillor
sorry,
Ham-
can you just get Ms. McElwee to put that in the chat? It was cutting in and out as she was reading it.
sorry, is it in the chat? No. Oh, you sent it to him. Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Do we have a mover and a second moved by Councillor McIsaac, Councillor Nixon? Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Now we're at item 6.2. Discretionary grants fund review, a report from our Deputy Director of Finance. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I don't have a slideshow to accompany my discretionary grants report this evening, but I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage some consideration on the purpose and effectiveness of the city's current discretionary grant program. Tonight's discussion could focus on three main areas: the eligibility criteria for applicants, the size of the fund, which is currently budgeted at $14,400, and the future of the program, whether it should continue as is, be revised, or be discontinued. For those members of council who were not on the discretionary grants committee this past year, there was some thoughtful discussion during the annual grant meeting about the overall effectiveness and value of the program in its current form. At that time, the committee expressed interest in revisiting the policy, which is what brings us forward today. Your feedback this evening will help guide the next steps, whether that involves refining the existing policy, adjusting the fund allocation, or evaluating whether the program should continue. I'm happy to support the discussion and answer any questions you may have about the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mullen. Initial thoughts from council. Turn to anyone who may already be on the committee. Councillor Adia Kelly.
Your worship, I've been on the committee the last, well, since I've been a councillor. One of the things that we did come up with was looking at 2 intakes. But hearing our speaker and the importance, I hesitate to use up a lot of staff's time because I know, everybody's really pressed, but maybe we do need a little more input. Maybe the eligibility criteria could be changed, and maybe some feedback about that. I don't know how difficult it would be to even put it up on Let's Talk or something like that, just to get a little bit more of a sense. Because I think it's a little bit of a struggle right now with the current criteria and, the repeat applications, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's thank you, Councillor. There's a sort of a general misconception in the community that if you've applied once, you can't apply again. I know there is criteria that, and you forgive me because I can't remember exactly what it says from the report, but it limits applications in terms of reapplying, but it doesn't eliminate that possibility. And I wonder if there's maybe a revision due that makes it a bit more plain language and helps people understand is that what it says? Yeah. And
It says twice in a 5-year period.
thank you, Councillor. And do we have a sense why we're getting fewer eligible applicants? Is that because of the selection criteria, or is it because there are fewer fewer groups coming forward? Do we have a sense of that?
I think what we see for applicants that are ineligible is that they've received the funding in at least 2 of the 5 years.
Okay.
And we do get lots of applicants that are applying for things that are out of Fernie, like out of the municipality. So we see things that are more like regional in nature. So that in the policy is disqualifies them from receiving any funding.
And from those who've been on the committee, is it clear, like the committee members, that applicants understand the process or that potentially they don't understand the process? Councillor Ramanas and Councillor McIsaac.
Sorry, Your Worship, my experience has been entirely different from what Councillor is saying here. Like I thought it was okay. I mean, it's can you elaborate like what you mean by those 2 different types of intakes?
Well, Councillor Hamilton and Councillor McIsaac and I were originally on it this term, and we did find we had a couple sort of worthy things that didn't meet the criteria, so we couldn't give to them. Like, for example, I won't name names, but one wasn't an official society, for example. Then this past, actually, for yourself and Councillor Nixon and I, there was someone that we actually felt we would have given funds to, but we couldn't because they'd received in 2 of the last 5. So, we talked about, well, can we make an exception to policy? Like, what are those so that's kind of what led to some of the, I think, and maybe Councillor McIsaac or Councillor Hamilton or Nixon will have more to add, but just looking at the criteria and possibly putting out 2 intakes to broaden, give it more visibility even.
All right. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. If you'll allow, I'd like to give some of the context from the early days of this, when we started putting the policy together, as why some of those decisions were made, which is not a suggestion that we shouldn't change them at all, just that how those decisions came about. And the city of Fernie has been giving out grants to organizations for many years. It didn't start in 2019. 2019 is when some sort of official policy was created so that it was not ad hoc. One of the concerns at the time was that there were organizations that appeared to, they would never become sustainable of their own course. So they were always going to be coming and looking for grants in order to sustain what their venture was. And the concern about that was not so much that, it's that that was also now potentially preventing new opportunities that could become sustainable from accessing grant monies to get started. And so this whole idea of limiting the number of access points over a period of time, it would mean that those organizations that were unsustainable and didn't have a path to sustainability, they would eventually move on to something else because that wasn't working. And that would allow for new opportunities, new organizations and new events and those types of things to come forward. So that was the thinking at the time. I do think that the current, is that the fridge doors left open? I do think that the nature of many of the opportunities that come to our table and ask that, they are fledgling, right? They're in that incubator period. And it's very often the case, I think, that a single year probably isn't enough opportunity for them to get the ball rolling. But we also want to draw a balance between some sustainable funding for them for a couple of years to get rolling and also ensuring that there's money available for new opportunities coming down the road. So the 2 and 5 was the balance that was chosen. Is it the best one? I'm not sure. I certainly think that's worthy of a debate, but I just wanted to give some context for why it is the way it is today. So I do think while I'm at it, I'll speak briefly to, Councillor Audie Kelly's mention about the 2 intake. That was something to just add some context to that. The first time we noticed that, one of the discussions we had is we had a youth group at the table who were saying by the time the intake comes, they're already have had to make the commitments that they're doing for their investments. And so if we had done a second intake, like intakes every 6 months, there would be an intake opportunity for them in advance of some of the youth opportunities that they were doing that they would be able to apply to. So that was where the initial idea of potentially doing a second intake, especially if we were not going to be finding enough opportunities to give out the money, that was there. So I still think we should consider that.
Thank you. Looks like he disappeared. I saw that Councillor Hamilton had his hand up there and Councillor Nixon.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Well, he disappeared.
He did.
He did.
He's gone. Yeah, so I remember applying for or sending a letter to the city in 2016 on behalf of Wham Bam asking for money. And we got the money for Wham Bam, we gave it out. And then later in the year, when they went to renovate the bathrooms and the community center, there was no money because they gave it to Wham Bam that year. So it was very ad hoc, as Councillor McIsaac has said. I think that there's a lot of work put into this by volunteers. They have to provide financials, they have to provide all sorts of stuff. And I think it leads to a lot of disappointment because we don't have a massive pool of funds. It's not like the Ready grants. I mean, the resident directed Columbia Basin Trust grants, right? And so I'm hesitant to, and I hear Ms. Baker's comments as well, about the $250 means something for somebody, right? But it's just like, I always wonder, maybe perhaps we could fold it into the CBT Ready grants. And I mean, like the idea of the 2 intakes as well, but $2,000 worth of staff time to run this program for $14,000 worth of grants is not I'm not sure how effective that is, you know, and if there was a way, because the CBT does pay for our staff time for the grants, if I'm correct, for our grant time, our staff time for the grants, I believe. It would be an interesting alternative to do that as well. So I don't know. I'm waiting for more information.
Thank you. Councillor Shoesmith?
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Yeah, just as you were starting to speak, my mind was going the same place you went with that. I think seeing as we already have a whole setup where we're here doing the grant thing, I mean, having it happen again for another amount feels to me like we should just take the efficiency of doing it once, roll it into the other process. Even if it is a separate stream or a separate, it'd be nice to take care of it at the same time or just roll it in with that, I would think.
Yeah, in terms of, yeah, having us gathered and I think it would help us all better understand this stream. I don't disagree with that. I think combining the two is not a bad idea. Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. To be clear, that $2,000 is probably not cash expense. It's just staff's time, right? We are not spending $2,000
No.
to run the program. It's no.
No, that is staff time.
It is staff time. Where I was going with this, Your Worship, is I understand, you know, there's some synergies that you can get by combining it with the Ready grant program. But a part of me also believes that this was all developed for a reason, and there are going to be user groups that might be looking at it as a source of funding for them. So why try fixing when it is not broken? So I would just leave it as it is. Continue with Ready grant also, even that's a phenomenal program, and just run with it.
Thank you. Councillor McIsaac?
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Ramirez. While I see some potential efficiencies in process in putting them together, they are two different beasts serving two different purposes with different criteria and so on. I feel that would create greater public confusion rather than helping. I feel I would be remiss if I didn't put my contrarian hat on for a minute and make the pitch that we consider expanding the program. And the reason why I think we should consider expanding it is where we provide the opportunity for local groups to take on opportunities and challenges, there is potentially savings for us if we're not having to do those things. And I'll point to the recent Canada Day, for example, where a bunch of local groups got together and did probably the best Canada Day we've had in years, with considerable less staff time and cost and so on our side of the equation. So there is value in enabling local groups, in enabling local societies and not-for-profits and volunteer organizations and so on. This seed capital, which is maybe the only thing that a new organization has access to, can be that thing that gets them rolling. They have to meet a more stricter set of criteria to get to the Ready grant, for example, over us. And so they may need a year or two to form a society and those types of things. And this could be the thing that gets them there. There is, again, and much like economic development discussion earlier, it is often difficult to know what the benefit is until it arrives. And this is more about feathering the nest and making that opportunity, room for eggs and chicks to go. And I'm going to end that metaphor as quickly as I can. But if you see what I'm saying, I think well, I recognize, you know, that we have a lot of very frugal challenges and choices ahead of us. But this, much like in the case of economic development, this may be one of those things where the payoff of the investment is much greater than the investment. So it's just something for us to consider as we're looking forward at this.
Thank you. Councillor Audrey Kelly?
Thanks, Your Worship. So kind of going down a little bit of the road Councillor McIsaac went down earlier. So if you look at the table that our finance gave us, we gave out all the money in 23, half the money
Mhm.
in 24, and 3/4 of the money last year. So have we maybe not communicated the criteria well?
Mm.
Maybe our communication could be a little bit better before the grant, the grants are open. Here's the criteria, the deadline is this, just to give, and then maybe more groups would put in. Because one of the good examples was out of the area, right? Well, we can't.
Yeah.
Even if we thought it was fabulous, it doesn't meet our policy. Can there be a mechanism for an exception request? Like, let's say someone did get money 2 out of the 5 years. Can we have an exception request that we bring to the rest of council and say, hey, we know they got money, but they have this new avenue and maybe we want to fund it. Like those types of things, like maybe we're not sharing, maybe it's not broadly known. Maybe that's the problem. I don't know.
Yeah, I suspect there's some truth in that, and trying to sort of synergize what I'm hearing here. I tend to agree with Councillor Ramadas on the if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But given the decline, it's potentially not broken, but there's potentially a gap. And I guess I don't know enough history of at least personally, organizations. Councillor Nixon pointed to one event that has, continuing and continues again this year, that saw some success arise out of these funds. So I'm hesitant to make any changes at this juncture without sort of having that a level of background there. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. A comment about the criteria thing that I wanted to make after I was reading through it is, I do think that there are potentially a couple tweaks to the criteria that we could make if we're of a like mind sort of philosophically about it. Like one of the examples, like in 3, where it says the City of Fernie grant should not be considered as the primary source of funding for the organization. I honestly think we should consider striking that. I think for startup organizations in our community, we may be the funding of last resort, and I think that should be the opportunity. There may be a bunch of small groups out there that particular clause is preventing them from coming forward because they don't actually have another funding source, right?
Yeah.
So there's a couple potential tweaks like that, that combined with perhaps a better communication, outward communication about what our hopes and desires are from that fund, would help. So I don't know if we want to start wordsmithing and working on that now, but
I don't think so.
But I think a few tweaks like that could make a difference.
Yeah. Councillor Shoesmith and then Councillor Nixon.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Councillor Nixon. I find myself slipping more into the Milligan Ramadas idea here that maybe we just kind of don't fix what ain't broke. If there's a procedural change or something that would make it better. I haven't been through the thing, so I wouldn't know, but that would be nice. But other than that, I think we should just let it keep trucking.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon, then Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Worship. So, I mean, at the end of our session that we had here on discretionary grants, the reason why you're here is because we had major questions about it. And it was the size of the fund is Councillor McIsaac makes a really good point. I think that's where I stumble, is the size of the fund is $14,000, it's a fund of disappointment a lot of the times, because you see groups and you want to fund them as well. But the whole idea of if it's not broken, that's the reason why you're here, because we thought at that time it was broken. So thank you for the report. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So,
no, I appreciate that context. Thank you. Yeah. And not having worked with it intimately, as those on that committee have, I don't have a sense of that really. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Apologies for dropping off there earlier. I had my hand up earlier just to add some context, but what I could hear through the breaking up was Councilor McIsaac hit the points I want to make. Having said that, you know, I do also wonder if, you know, it's not broken per se, but there are tweaks that need to be made. You know, I have always struggled with the size of the pot. You know, I appreciate where the money's coming from and that any increase is going to result in a tax increase of some way, shape, or form. But at the end of the day, if we can increase that fund and it can alleviate burdens elsewhere, that would be great. That would be a great leveraging of funds. The other point that I've always have kind of quite scratched my head about is the idea of it not being the primary funding or the sole funding source. And, you know, if we look at all the different elements of the policy, you know, maybe this is the funding that an organization can then use to leverage. But if it's, you know, they don't have any other funding to begin with, so they're ineligible, but you know, that chicken and egg question that keeps coming up. So I'm certainly in support of keeping the discretionary grants, but having a look at it and seeing where we might be able to adjust it to better meet the needs of the community.
Well, and that sort of raises a question for me that reflective of the previous discussion about, is this an item, to your point and a point Councillor Ramada has made earlier about, it's not necessarily a tax increase if we increase this, but it is potentially a reduction in service elsewhere. Like, there is a balancing act that we have to undergo. And I wonder if this is maybe something accordingly that we bring back at budget time as a specific discussion item during budget that, you know, again, would allow us both to look at the number, but also to look at the process and see if it's how we advance it from that point. Isaac. Oh, further? Councillor Hamilton?
I agree wholeheartedly with that notion, and you know, as part of that, getting community feedback, you know, getting public input on, is this the way that you want to see us proceed with your tax dollars? Is, you know, we will invest in community groups that are going to help you with the, maybe not necessarily the day-to-day services, but a lot of perhaps maybe the more social services that have kind of fallen into the city's lap to deal with, but really aren't in our wheelhouse, so to speak, to be dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Councillor McIsaac?
Thank you, Worship. I fully support bringing the discussion for the discretionary grant funding back during the budget process for us to consider the amount. But I think that we should, prior to that, have the discussion, make changes to the process so we understand why we're changing the amount, what we're trying to actually accomplish. I think doing those two things at the same time might be, like, I think that would muddy the budget process.
Potentially.
Yeah. I'd rather see us have a philosophical discussion about what we think we're actually accomplishing with this, and then what those rules should be in order to create that outcome. And then later on go, and now how much money do we have to give to that cause?
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think the policy framework has to come first. Yeah, I 100% agree. Any tweaks we make to the policy framework. I'll maybe look to our CAO, and thankfully he put his hand up when I did.
Might I just suggest then that the item be tabled for a future committee of the whole meeting? Because the intake is this fall.
Yeah.
So if you're going to change the policy, we need to do that in August for a fall intake. Maybe it comes back to either a special committee at one of the August meetings or the committee of the whole in August, depending, with this report attached, and council in the meantime can turn their minds to what they want to achieve. Is that sufficient?
That works. Yeah. Do you need a motion to that effect?
I would ask our corporate officer, does council need to table the matter, I hope I'm using the right words. She's the
It's
corporate
actually
officer.
postponed. Yeah, postpone. Table would mean we're going to talk about it later on in this meeting.
So motion to postpone,
To postpone, correct.
Councillor McIsaac, seconded by Councillor Adia Kelly. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Good discussion. I would ask if we could, thank you, Ms. Mullen. She's fleeing the podium. Mr. Barnowski.
If I may, very quickly, Councillor McIsaac made a very good point. Canada Day was fantastic, and the groups who organized it and led it were phenomenal. And that kind of community partnership is amazing. It did, however, come at the full cost and slightly more staff time than a normal Canada Day would normally. So I just don't want council to have the impression that there are capacity or financial savings. Rather, with the very limited financing and capacity, those community groups did an amazing job, and it was an honor to work with them. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you for that clarification. Before we move on to the next item, I'd ask if council would endorse a 2-minute recess. Thank you. We will be right back. Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Rose. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry that was a bit longer than 2 minutes. We'll now move on to item 6.3, Fire Hall Conceptual Design and Budget, a report from our Director of Engineering and Public Works, Ms. Weir. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to present to you the city's fire hall conceptual design and project budget, following which Director Burdett will review the proposed fire hall funding strategy. You can expect this presentation to include background on the progress through our pre-construction services contract with our design build team, an overview of the design process to date, the facility description and the conceptual design, discussion on the Class C cost estimate and risk registry development, a summary on the recommended mitigation for the loss of the Prentice Ball Diamond, and the project budget and recommended funding strategy. So you'll remember back in March, at the March 11th, 2025 regular meeting, Council approved the award of our contract for our pre-construction services scope to Chandos to be our fire hall's design builder. And the pre-construction services is the first phase of our progressive design build project delivery, where the ultimate goal of this phase is a negotiated construction contract of a designed facility. So to complete their due diligence, Chandos reviewed all of our available documentation from our pre-planning work in 2024, and they completed a topographical survey, and together we engaged a flight path consultant to advise on our flight path impacts of the nearby helipad. And this report represents the completion of the second step in this scope, which is the presentation of the schematic design and Class C cost estimate. The next steps of the project are to progress the design to a point where we can develop a Class B cost estimate within 10% accuracy, and presentation of the detailed owner's statement of requirements with the facility's performance specs. And then the final phase is negotiating a lump sum to deliver the construction of the contract. And that will only be able to occur once the design is sufficiently developed. And of course, council endorses said contract. I wanted to provide a summary of the work we've done to date to give some context over how we've come to develop this design in front of you. In early April, our consultants hosted a workshop with a cross-section of the city's leadership team and the firefighting team to learn the context of the city's fire hall project needs, align the team's values, and identify project success and risk factors. And then during our reoccurring weekly meetings, we've continually reviewed the spatial programming with the lens of developing a needs-based facility that will support effective operations of our fire service, and worked with the project team to reduce the footprint, reviewing the layout, materials, and constructability to bring down the size and cost of the facility while ensuring it meets all the functional and performance requirements. And the current proposed design already represents a footprint that's been reduced more than by almost 30% from the designer's initial concepts. We've also hosted meetings to review the proposed conceptual design with the career firefighters, the community working group, the city's management teams, and incorporated any feedback received from them. And additionally, we've had meetings with our project advisors at Collier's Project Delivery to review the designs and get additional industry intel into other comparable successful fire hall projects. So the conceptual design, I would like to provide a summary of some of the guiding design principles, and then I'll pull up the drawings should council have any specific questions on the spaces. So we are proud to present a conceptual fire hall design that has the following highlights. The layout enables quick access from the living quarters and provides clear circulation paths to minimize response. It's focused on the safety and well-being of our firefighters, with separated dirty and clean zones to reduce the contaminant and carcinogen exposure that can be present in firefighting duties. And some of the features to this effect include high efficiency air filtration and isolation of the exhaust generating areas, a decontamination area, and gear washing rooms. It has rest areas with natural light and fitness amenities to support recovery from the demanding profession and provide the training facilities needed so our firefighters can be fit for duty. The spaces that are proposed are sized to be compact but adaptable as our call volumes and apparatus sizes and potentially staffing needs change to accommodate future growth in the city, including up to 4 dorms, adaptable office space, and sufficient storage to cover increasing emergency service demands. The facility includes a multi-purpose room that will be a community asset. It would be used for training at least once a week by the fire department, but also accessible and bookable by the community as an events and gathering space. It features large windows on 2 sides, elevated ceilings, digital connectivity, and a kitchenette, and would act as a city's EOC in the event of all types of emergencies. The apparatus bays designed provide sufficient space for maneuvering, maintenance, and housing all of our fire apparatuses, including the drive-through bays that provide improved safety and ease of departure. It's a cost-effective design with durable building materials, fit-for-purpose finishings, and easy-to-clean surfaces. There are elements to add architectural interests that would integrate the building into the surrounding community, and so it can be a facility of community pride. The design incorporates sustainable and resilient designs such as high-efficiency HVAC systems with heat recovery, on-demand control for air conditioning, low water use plumbing, high-efficiency hot water heating, lighting with LED fixtures, among others. And the facility will be prepared for extreme weather events through its post-disaster classification requirements, including the structural redundancy to withstand increased environmental loads such as snow, wind, and seismic, and backup power to ensure safety and reliability of the services. So the facility is divided into 4 spaces, and just wanted to share the list here that was included in the report. There's 2 floors of the administrative side, the apparatus bays, and then the rooms contained adjacent to the bays. And so the 2 floors of the administrative side represent approximately 46% of the square footage of the facility, a similar amount of space being assigned to the bays, which is 43% of the space, and then the rooms along the side of the facility accessed from the bays are 11% of the square footage. Here's an aerial view of the site. You can see the access to the site is in line with 15th Street, where the public parking and drive-through lane for the firefighters returning to site would be. The siting of the facility on the parcel was done with care with the goal of maintaining a large developable parcel to the left of the screen there, as discussed for potential future co-uses on the site in our 2024 planning work. One of the other main drivers of the siting for the facility is the adjacent helipad and the flight path, the edges of which are shown in yellow there. And so putting the parking and driving lane on the north side of the facility was necessary to limit the facility height in the flight path closest to the helipad. And our aeronautical consultant, as well as interior health, have been engaged in discussions and recommendations to ensure that helipad retains full functionality. And then just to orient yourselves, the multi-purpose room is shown at the front right of the facility, the firefighter kitchen and day room at the back on the same side, and the staff parking and training yard at the rear of the facility.
Councillor Ramdas?
Is it okay to ask questions now, Your Worship? Yeah. Okay. If you wouldn't mind going to the previous slide, Director. 46% administrative side, 54% the actual operational side. Is that norm in other fire halls?
Mayor through to Councillor, our architects didn't indicate comparable percentage breakdown. I think that The halls and stairways and additional spaces required to move between all of the rooms do end up taking up a fair amount of square footage as well. You'll note there's 2 stairwells, one of them being the training tower, which is a square staircase. So I would say that we're calling it the administrative side, but it contains many components that are required for fire operations. So not sure that it's accurate to say that all of the operations are contained in the other 46%.
Thank you.
So here's the view of the facility from 5th Ave with the bays on the right and the multi-purpose room and administrative spaces being on the left, and the training tower sticking up from behind at the rear of the facility. This is the facility from the public parking area or the hospital ball diamond direction, and the windows are shown into the administrative facilities, the offices, kitchen, dorms, etc. This is the south elevation from the police station direction. And this is the east elevation from the rear, the school, track and field direction. So here's the first floor facility layout as proposed, and I've already highlighted many of the features, but would welcome the opportunity for any questions about these spaces, or just to orient yourselves in the top right. Let's see if you can see my cursor. Yes. So the entrance, the public entrance from the public parking is on the top right here with the accessible washroom and entrance to the multi-purpose room, the reception. We come down through this would be locked access for, City of Fernie staff through the open office and enclosed offices. At the rear of the facility is the kitchen and day room. This is the training and hose tower that we discussed, where the stairs go in a square to create a training environment. This is where the firefighters would move from the administrative side through their gear room, where they would store and don their firefighting gear and head into the bays. Here's the bays, and on the far left is the rooms we talked about: storage, the workshop, SCBA, gear cleaning. You can see at the bottom left, firefighters returning from scene can go into the bay and into the gear cleaning and decon, shower, and then move over towards the clean side once they've put away their gear. The upper floor, highlighted only in blue there, aside from the stairs, is significantly smaller than the lower floor. And it would be accessible only to the staff of the Fernie Fire and Emergency Services full-time and auxiliary staff. It contains the dorms, washrooms, fitness area, some storage, hallway, and stair access. And then on the left is the storage mezzanine, highlighted in green. So it's taking advantage of some of the space required by the extra height of the bays to store goods there. So the Class D estimated cost to construct the fire hall as designed is $13,585,000, which does equate to $859 a square foot. Our architect and builder have acknowledged that we are an extremely motivated client to control the design and size and to contain the cost. And we have focused with them on many ways to contain cost and size over the last 3 months. Through reducing the proposed bay width and lengths, the proposed number and sizes of dorms, offices, locker room, meeting room. We went and we measured every room that we have in our existing facilities. Our office spaces are comparable, multi-purpose spaces, our washrooms, everything to ensure that we weren't suggesting that they shrink it to standards that wouldn't be fit for use. The primary value engineering and cost reduction strategies that we've implemented to date include investigating savings from stacking the building into a more basic square shape. So having to move additional rooms onto the upstairs floor and sort of eliminating some of those architectural interest features. And we went through that exercise, and the outcome was that there was not significant cost savings. We've selected a facility material that's of precast concrete panels that is significantly more cost-effective than steel frame construction with equivalent longevity. We've reviewed all of the finishes to ensure they are basic grade, such as flooring, fixtures, and appliances. And we've removed several proposed enhancements by the designer that were not necessary to meet functional requirements. So the above cost estimate was prepared by Chandos and was created based on significant input from trade and supplier market, totaling 8.8 million of that budget. And then of that amount, a significant amount of it came from local suppliers, Kimberly, Fernie, and the remainder of the budgets were developed out of Calgary and Kelowna trades. And so when this project scopes do go to tender by our builder, they would be sure to reach out to trades from across BC and Alberta to ensure that they are securing best value, but they, you know, the trades are kind enough to provide preliminary pricing, which really helps inform our budget. Another portion of the estimate, 24% of it, is based on Chandos's own pricing that, you know, they can essentially guarantee with their labor procurement contracting requirements. And those include items such as the phase 2 design fees, site supervision, project management, safety, documentation, out-of-town living allowances, bonding, insurance, profit, all of those items. And finally, the remainder of the budget is based on their knowledge of recent and relevant construction of fire halls. And so what this means is that this estimate is based on a significantly higher level of accuracy than comparing other price per square foot halls that might have extremely varied components within their facility to meet their organizational needs.
Sorry, Ms. Weir. Councillor Hamilton, you have a question?
I did, thank you. Do you mind going back one slide, Ms. Weir? So in the bottom bullet point there, I did have a couple questions noted down around some of those savings. I feel like the answer should be obvious for the commercial kitchen exhaust hood removal. We're still going to have a kitchen exhaust hood, just not commercial grade. Is that a correct interpretation of that?
Yes, Mayor, through to council, that's the correct interpretation. And the fire department is the one who evaluates the requirements of commercial kitchens and can provide exemptions based on uses. And the basis for that is that there's no deep fryer, is my understanding, is a large factor in whether.
Okay, and then the sorry to interrupt. The other question I had with the removal of an operable partition in the multipurpose room, is an operable partition one that's like motorized or just one that operates function, can partition the room?
Mayor, through to council, it is just the partition in general is cost that much. It is not motorized. And so we have suggested removing it at that price. We discussed among the project team and senior staff, and for that value and the amount of time we suspect it would be divided or increased revenue from trying to rent both sides, we didn't see that it provided that level of enhancement, but.
Okay, that answers kind of my next question, I think, which was less to do with have we discussed the value. I guess my concern with something, you know, a $60,000 item or $40,000 item on a $13 million budget, like those are pretty small things to be cutting to try and save a few dollars. And I'm just worried that, you know, we're being penny wise and pound poor, that we're not looking into the future, into the facilities projected use 5, 10, 20 years from now. And would we be better off long-term value spending that little bit of extra money now, as opposed to trying to save it so that the facility's more usable in the future? But it sounds like you've discussed that in your group.
We did discuss it, but open for your input. I know the report mentioned the idea of sort of like a scope ladder. So if there's things that are nice to haves or enhanced functionality as opposed to requirements that you'd like to look at adding in or removing, you're certainly welcome your feedback.
Councillor Evans?
Thanks, Your Worship. If you wouldn't mind going back to that AutoCAD drawing, Ms. Spear, the one before. I had a question, and I have built lockers at the mine site, so I am a little aware of how locker room construction works. Why are there 40 lockers?
Mayor, through to council, that's sized for future growth, so to accommodate all of the planned auxiliary firefighters as the department grows. So each auxiliary, I believe the target is 25, and there's the 8 career staff. So that is also a work in progress. Like, they were just showing the maximum amount of lockers they could fit in that space. You could also certainly look at removing some of the lockers and adding additional, table space or space for equipment and whatnot.
Further?
Yes, Your Worship. Also, the multi-purpose room, say if you didn't have that, what will happen?
Mayor, through to council, for firefighting operations, it was identified as a key component of the facility to provide training space. So to facilitate a gathering and training area that can host all of the career and auxiliary staff. It was certainly recommended as an asset. And then the fact that it was dual purpose to be utilized by other community members was a way to enhance the facility.
Well, because the locker room was mentioned, Ms. Weir, and I asked this question out of complete ignorance, but we have mixed gender firefighters coming and going. Is a single locker room appropriate, or do we need more?
I'll ask the chief to correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that they maintain their dressed and they put on their turnouts over
Their
top of their
bunker
clothes.
gear
So
over top
a single or a single locker room is standard, whereas there are divided rooms to shower and
Okay. Perfect.
dorm rooms
Yeah.
to dress into regular clothing.
Answers the question. Thank you so much. Councilor Rabideau?
I have a few more questions, Your Worship,
Yeah,
if you
please.
wouldn't mind. Talking about, the gender neutral thing, that's a whole can of worms, and it takes a lot of time sometimes. There was another question. There was a line in the report, Director, where you said suggested potential items for removal from current budget and addition to a scope ladder could include 1, technology, 2, fire pole, 3, covered parking for chief and assistant chief. That seems like a strange mixed bag of items here. I would imagine fire pole is pretty critical for running a fire hall, or is it not? And then you have covered parking, and why do we need a covered parking?
Mayor, through to council, I'll do my best to address those. So they are items that we see as enhancements to the facility as opposed to requirements. So the fire pole debate was certainly had in terms of it's more of a preference than a requirement. There are already 2 sets of stairs required to go to the upper floor. And so I don't think that I think it's a debate on preference and functionality as opposed to a requirement of a facility. They are just to demonstrate that we have already looked at all the big options to trim size and cost. And those are the smaller things that when we were getting down to, okay, we've tried to reduce this by hundreds of thousands, we've tried to reduce this by tens of thousands, we get down to a more granular level of smaller items that are less essential.
Further?
Where I'm going with this, Your Worship, is trying to figure out, what's the square footage there, and is there any more reduction? Like, why is there 40 was my question. Like, I understand it's the future growth potential that you're potentially talking about. Can we put that into this, what you call it as scope ladder document, and give us an option of what this might look like if I were to just have enough number of lockers and enough number of seating arrangements for our current workforce versus what you have here? and see what the cost reduction looks like. Is that possible?
Mayor, through to council, I think it's difficult because it's currently a blend of sizing the spaces and making them compact but adaptable has kind of been our message. So making sure they're not too far above and beyond what we need, but that acknowledging that you can't go back and add some more lockers if you've maxed out your lockers at 30. And so I think that we have certainly gone through that exercise of, are there any more spatial cuts that we can make? And our designer essentially came back to us and said, no, we firmly believe, you know, if you continue to chip away at this facility, you are going to reduce the functionality. And so, for example, the lockers themselves would be an area, they're $1,000 a pop, those lockers. They have aeration in that room and whatnot to remove the contaminants. So we can, you know, cut 5 of those lockers and save a few $1,000s and install them later if needed as
So, sorry, Your Worship, I know where this will go. Someone will jump on me and say, oh, this is all small nickel and diming. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. I'm trying to figure out, you know, what's the logic behind those numbers that you have here. So I appreciate that 5,000 square feet reduction happened between the previous iteration and to date, which is great. I commend you guys for going through that exercise and really appreciate that. But I'll be honest, Your Worship, it's still $15 million is an eye-watering number for me. I feel like maybe there is some more work that can be done to kind of pressure test some of the square footage for administrative side of things and give us an option before we go for next steps.
There is a process, I understand from the report, Director Weir, there's another iteration of value engineering as we move to a Class B estimate. And, you know, to apply a metaphor to what you just said, at some point, the juice isn't going to be worth the squeeze, that the building will no longer be functional for our needs and certainly won't have future functionality. So at some point, presumably we'll get a report on how moving toward the Class B estimate, that value engineering process has taken us there, I guess. Is that fair?
Yes, as we move towards a Class B, what you'll see is ideally not major changes in the size and shape of the facility that impact the budget to greater than a 15%. What you're going to see is more detail on how the facility's plumbed and where the HVAC goes and how the electrical design will be developed and some more details on the structural. And then we'll be looking at those systems and are there savings within those systems based on the increasing level of detail and, you know, the cladding or different things that go on the outside of the building. But ideally, you're not looking to make significant structural changes that change your project budget. You're trying to refine the level of detail and continue looking for value engineering based on the new level of detail that's available.
Thank you. Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. A few things, if you don't mind, it's a little
Yeah.
bit of a mixed bag. I saw the comment about the technology similar to what we have here. Would there be thought given to actually just moving council there and taking this technology with so that the technology then would exist or possibly benefit training? I don't know. And then I wanted to ask, I remember something sort of critical about a couple things Creston did that they really wish they hadn't have done. And Chief might be the better person for, it had to do with the decon and where they put certain things, HVAC over the dorms. But I remember something critical about the decon.
Mayor, through to council. Yeah, so a big part of it was, the big one for Creston was storage. And they thought that many people had told them that they needed lots of storage. They didn't have enough storage, but there was a makeup unit that was put inside the bays, which they should have put outside. And I think that's maybe what you're referring to. That was really noisy. And so while they were in the bays, they basically have to wear earmuffs all the time because it's so loud. That was one of the things.
Yeah, and there was the position of one of the HVAC units, I think, over the dorm
Over
rooms,
the
as I
dorms.
recall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
as well.
Further?
I just felt like the decontamination was too small, or there was something, or maybe the cleaning room or something was, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what that was. They've found some more stuff since, that obviously you always do after a year or two. If I may, just to talk to Councillor Ramadas, you know, you talk about the locker room and, you know, originally that where you see the lockers at the top end of the picture, that was going to be a radio room / map room. And that could still be the case, but it gives us the option to use that. So normally what happens in operations is if we have a call out, we might have 2 trucks that go and you might have more firefighters that have arrived. They're in the bunker gear. They either have to be in the bays or they have to be in that room with their bunker gear on. So they're able to communicate and or maybe look at maps, see where hydrants are, and that all can happen in that little room. So we've actually taken some of that away to put the lockers in. But in the meantime, until future growth, until we need lockers, we can utilize. Also, we only took 2 offices, like we had more offices when we started, and we've moved it down to 2 offices when, you know, in the future, there might be like a fire prevention office during the day or whatever. So there was definitely a lot of cuts made.
Councillor, are you finished, Councillor Artie Kelly?
I was just going to say that I think this facility is considerably smaller than Creston's, is it not, Chief? Like 3,000 square feet or something?
I believe that the fire part is a little bit smaller, but we have an extra bay too, right?
Right.
Right.
Which, and then just one more
Yeah.
quibble, your worship, like, just to point out some of the administrative things that are called administrative, and maybe that's just the way it is in building plans. But like, to me, an IT room and a closet and a hallway is not really administrative. It's like functionality of the building.
Correct. And the
So-
mechanical room and so on, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like actual admin spaces, if we just looked at, if people were really curious about that, if we just looked at offices and things like that, that would literally be used for administration, it wouldn't be 43% of the building.
Correct.
Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Worship. Many thoughts. This is such a big deal for Fernie, and I mean, it's the biggest thing that's ever sat on our desk, that's for sure. Other than, and I think the City Works building was the previous one. And I think that it's like, we have to think about generational thinking here, because this is going to be around for the next 50 or 60 years at least. And yeah, I probably won't be here that long for sure. But I guess my question is, are we reducing safety? I mean, I see a lot of stuff in here that says reduce proposed bay widths and lengths. I mean, are the doors going to open and hit each other when they're inside? Is it like, you know, and I understand the concerns about, you know, the cost. I really do. I get it. But, you know, making the kitchen small and the day room and all this kind of stuff, it's really, it just kind of makes me nervous that we're not thinking for growth. And I look at the locker room and 40, and I was like, oh, that's really good. That's, you know, that's 24 auxiliary firefighters and 9, you know, others. So, I mean, then we have space to grow. The 4 bays I'm super happy with. The decon shower, it's 1. If you have 2 crews that are coming back at the same time, is that enough? 1 shower, so they got all stand and in line waiting, you know? So, I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about those reductions and our larger picture. I also have some questions about, you know, how close were we to having a LEED certified building as well? I mean, taking out the hydronic heating and stuff like that, and life cycle costs and stuff like that. It's really, you know, then we're going to have to plow all in front of the fire hall. And I mean, we could have, you think about the IGS block and it's all hydronic and there's no snow removal whatsoever. So I don't know. There's a few questions, but I'm just going to start with the safety one and then the decon showers. How's that?
I think for the safety aspect, and we have reviewed it in detail, like the reduction in widths of the bays and things like that, our architects have been very responsive and we've said, you know, how do we cut square footage? Can we reduce the spacing between the bays? And they've done those checks. They've said, yes, the doors still fit. Yes, there's still, you'll see there's wider passageways on the two edges of the bays. So those wider hallways are, you know, nice to have, improve flow, provide better service. You know, they had those wider hallways between every bay kind of thing. And they agreed that that's might be nice, but it is a way to reduce the size of the facility to look at having, you know, just enough space to function without having it be bigger. So I think we've been very careful with the reductions. And like I said, we've gone to the lunchroom in the yards building with all the firefighters and said, look, this is how big the lunchroom is. And we've gone to the offices and the washrooms and things. And we have been looking for cost containment and size containment, but also cognizant of we don't want it to show up and be very small spaces that are not functional. So in terms of the decon shower, maybe you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, after a call, basically we do a gross decon, which is like just hose them down in their gear when we get there. So that all gets thrown in a bag, puts in a vehicle, and that's taken into the dirty side. And then, yeah, slowly guys just go in and take the showers in there. So at this point, we've got one, which is one more than we've had already, so.
Councillor McIsaac?
Thank you, Worship. My first comment is, this is some pretty impressive pencil sharpening right off the bat. But I had a couple of small questions. With regards to the gear room and 40 lockers, I was just listening to the chief describe everybody getting into turnout gear and assembling out of there. Like realistically, in that little space, like with all the lockers in there, there's not 30 square feet in there. How many people can actually be in turnout gear in there at one time? Is it big enough? Like contrary to thinking it's too small, too big. I'm wondering if it's too small.
So the designer builds these fire halls and he's figured it out and he's gone to basically the minimum, but also you're not going to have them all at once. So people are coming in from all over town and they're filling a truck and then more people are coming in. So it's kind of like a
rotating through.
Yeah. So on a practice night, yeah, everyone's going to go in there and change for sure, but it won't be in an emergency sort of thing. So
right. Fair enough. Thank you for that. And then the other question I wanted to ask about that Councillor Ramadas raised, which was about the covered parking. And I wonder if the chief might speak a little bit about what happens with the chief or the deputy with their vehicles there when there is an emergency, because you're got to go and jump in your vehicle and drive there differently than what the trucks are doing and stuff. Is that correct?
that is correct. So right now, currently what happens is operationally, if we get a major, if I'm in the office, my gear is in the back of my truck, I put it on and I go. But if it's winter time and I have to, take the snow off the vehicle, that obviously takes some time. So our thought was to have a covered, not in like warm, but just covered just to prevent the snow and all that on the emergency lights. Even when the snow lands on the emergency lights, you've got to clear that off because if you're going code 3 and people don't see the lights, those kind of things. So and generally we're the first ones there, sizing up, doing 360 or whatever, making a plan. So obviously to have a clear vehicle right off the bat is important.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. I think Councillor McIsaac covered portion of it. So I'm trying to parse out like how director has written this. Would it be fair to say that these 3 items, that's technology, fire pole, and covered parking, are like no regrets cut that you can make right now? Or is the jury still out whether we need it or not? Like, what's the thinking here?
Like Mayor through to Councillor, the thinking was to demonstrate that we've thought about what things we can cut and what are necessary and what are enhancing features, and we've included them in the project budget currently, meaning we recommend keeping them there. But acknowledging that you may have been asking, what are some items that are enhancements and how much do they cost? And have you looked at ways to reduce them? We were trying to get ahead of those questions and show that we had considered the cost of some of the enhancements. So we do recommend including all of those items in the project budget. It would be based on enhancing the functionality of the hall.
Personally, it feels like if we can include a fire pole, we should include a fire pole. That just feels, I don't know, traditional and appropriate. That's a personal view. Councillor Kelly?
Sorry, just to clarify, these are things that are actually still included in the number, but things that there could possibly come out. Did I understand that right? Councillor McIsaac's giving me the yes, thanks.
Councillor Eminis?
And to be clear, Your Worship, the way I'm understanding it is this design is frozen. Like whatever we are saying here may not necessarily change anything here. Am I right? Like this, we might just say change the color from red to pink or something, but that's about it. Everything else is like set in stone and you're going to go ahead to the next stage.
Mayor through to Councillor. No, I don't think it's set in stone. It's a conceptual design. So if you saw the facility and completely disagreed with the size and shape and style of the facility and didn't want to advance that design, I certainly think you would be so entitled. I think that there are room for changes based on your direction as we advance through design. But what we are seeking is a project budget, and the project budget we have developed is based on this facility. So,
Councillor Kelly?
Your Worship, could we maybe get Director to just remind everyone what a Class C cost estimate means, just for people listening, just in case they don't know?
I'd love to. I have 3 more slides on it if I can continue. Please. Okay, so we talked about, sorry, I didn't say it here. The Class C estimate is 15%, within 15% accuracy is the target of a Class C cost estimate. So this next slide, I talked about this one. So this risk register is how we develop the contingency, which is the contingency is that 15% uncertainty in the budget. So to support our project budget development, Shandos assisted us in developing a risk register. And so the point of that exercise is to identify risks to the project through both the design and construction phase, assign a likelihood of occurrence and consequence, and then try to quantify the cost of that risk occurring, and then decide how much cost you're going to carry to be able to mitigate that risk. And so we did a very thorough exercise. 61 risks were identified. Some examples would be like weather impacts, so they would cost out the delays and recommend a contingency of carrying a certain amount of delay, or volatility of the supply chain as it continues to be unstable and somewhat unpredictable, or encountering soil conditions that unknown, they would cost out some additional excavation and haul of materials and try to account for a reasonable amount of unforeseen conditions. And so based on all of those estimates, the resulting contingency was 12.7%. And then with further discussion with our consultants, they agreed that at this point, carrying a 15% contingency, which 12 of those 15% are justifiable estimated risks. You're just buffering a little bit more for potentially additional unknown risk at this stage. And so, the risk or the contingency we're proposing is in line with the Class C cost estimate, which is 15%.
Councillor Eminis?
Got 2 questions, Your Worship.
Okay.
Just in terms of contingency, if you want to access contingency, does a change order come to you guys and you guys have to approve it and then go ahead, or is it like innately inbuilt into the initial cost itself?
So Mayor through to Council, at this point, it's just an estimate of the cost. It's not assigned to the city or the builder, but by the time we get to a construction contract, we've worked those risks to an additional level of detail where we're saying, you're going to carry this risk, we're going to carry this risk, you're going to carry this one, we're going to carry this one. And then if they want to access the funds, then yes, at that point, it would be a change order. But we would have those funds available and hopefully, and we would have the knowledge of what we would have agreed on, what the risk was going to cost to mitigate.
Gotcha. One more, Your Worship.
Yeah.
I was just looking at timelines. I'm sure the rest of the staff might speak to this later, but just jumping the gun here. July 15th is when the loan authorization bylaw needs to be read for the first and second and even third, is it? Like, is it possible before that meeting or during that meeting, maybe the first portion of the meeting, to actually walk us through a scope ladder here, wherein in the scope ladder, maybe show fewer number of lockers, fewer number of seats in the meeting room, get rid of these three items, that is technology, fire pole, and covered parking, and show what that estimate would look like? Would it be possible to do that?
Mayor, through to council, it's definitely possible to show the removal of all of the items we've priced as is, but resizing the rooms and redesigning the shape of the facility essentially, and the way, this is a concrete precast facility, and they've actually got estimates on the concrete precast walls and steel framing that would be required to support this facility. So the answer is yes, the things that we have available priced today, we can certainly provide a mechanism to remove them by next week, but we can't come up with a new design and new pricing for reduced sizes of rooms.
Would there, sorry, Your Worship, would there be a design impact if you reduce the seats, for example?
I'm not sure if you mean reduce the size of the room or buy less chairs.
I don't know. I'm just thinking an area this big with 40 people seating arrangement, reduce it by, I don't know, half or something, 20, like what does that look like? Is that, will that have an impact on the structural side of things?
Mayor, through to council, yes, if you want to look at the cost of cutting the multipurpose room, say in half, that would impact the structural, certain things we might be able to get a quick estimate of. Like I know that it's all there in spreadsheets, the pricing, the linear meters of concrete. And so there's certain things like that one, for example, trimming the edge of the facility would be a lot easier to estimate as opposed to trimming the locker room, because then somehow you have to fit all the rooms back in and reshape the facility. So depends on what you're asking for on whether I could deliver it by next week.
Okay, so the short answer is this is frozen design. There is no more optionalities here. We'll just try to, push this process through to the next step. Like that's what I'm getting out of this.
Does the risk register, and this is probably embedded in the volatility chain, the supply chain volatility, but I know there was a question when we visited Crescent about long lead time items and identifying those in the risk register early, and where we could sourcing them early so we get in a queue and ensure that they're available when we need them.
Yes, the risk register has lead time, material lead time, and associated mitigation dollars.
Thank you.
Now I'll just, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering about the chance for scope escalation, not de-escalation, and making us like following our OCP, which basically says promote the use of green building standards, such as those recommended by the Canadian Home Builders Association, or the LEED program for all buildings constructed or renovated in Fernie. So we're constructing a building. We're the leaders in this community. And I don't see any sort of climate change adaptation. I don't see, there's probably some stuff in there, but climate change is real. I believe in science, right? I believe that climate change is happening. It's, taking away the hydronic heating, it's energy efficient. It's reduces long-term operating costs. It can be integrated with solar. There's no solar on this building. There's, eventually we'll probably have an electric fire truck like they do in other parts of BC. And how are we going to charge that? We need a bigger battery. We need batteries, versus a diesel generator. I don't know. It's just, is there an opportunity to see that, even if we rough it in, the hydronic heating and rough in some solar stuff, is there a chance to see that, right? Just the wiring, so that we're not, in 10 years going, oh man, we should have put on a, 30 kilowatt hour array on the roof or whatever, right? So, and I look at the City Works building, is that whole top of that building should be covered in solar panels, right? And I thought it was a miss at the time, but we were so concerned with costs and getting it through. And I feel like that we're in the same boat this time. We're so concerned, even a couple $100,000 towards some sort of roughing to meet our climate change goals, right? This is one of the reasons why I want my kids to be proud of this building in another way too, so.
Mayor, through to Councillor Nixon, if I could, the hydronic heating, we did discuss at length before recommending removing it with our mechanical engineer. And he did, he didn't present an extremely convincing argument for keeping it. He said, we design and build fire halls all over the place, and they're perfectly happy with the product that the alternate provides for a significantly more cheap price. And then we also talked about the long-term operating costs, and he wasn't willing to indicate that you'd see significant reduction in the long-term operating costs. He said it's a similar space with a similar efficiency of heat. It's just a different type of heat. And so he wasn't advocating for the benefits of the hydronic heat that you're speaking of. So that was what played into, essentially, was a recommendation from the mechanical engineer that the product would be as satisfactory, minus the need to snow clear. And we did talk about, could we rough in pipes under the ground so that in the future we could add heating of the pad, so that we could add, and he said, the short answer was no. You'd essentially be installing components of both systems and eliminating the cost savings you were achieving by switching the systems. So he can rough it in and design it, but it would result in a more expensive system. Was kind of it wasn't like a medium. We were looking for, like, if we had just roughed in, would it only be 100,000 more and we could still realize the 390,000 savings? And his answer was no. So we did have some debate on that, but certainly is one of those items that we already have the pricing for, and should council wish to see that added back in, it's there. In terms of the lead facility design, I guess we didn't see that emerge as a desired parameter out of the extensive pre-planning work that we did in 2014. So I guess we have certainly designed to that, and we certainly can, but I guess we didn't see that as a direction that we'd previously received. And so we were looking for efficiencies, which I kind of listed in terms of high efficiency heating and insulating and LED and all those types of things, but we did not direct our designer. They asked, is it a priority for Fernie? And we did not ask them to include that into the design.
Thank you. Councillor Roddy Kelly.
I was just going to say thank you, and for having that fulsome discussion with the designer. And I didn't see any of that in the report, so I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Roddy Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Director Weir did actually answer some of the things, because it would be adding back about $500,000 roughly, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the hydronic, as you pointed out in the report. Perfect. Okay, so I understood that properly. And then LEED certification, LEED is almost kind of like a brand, isn't it? Like people can design energy efficient spaces that don't necessarily get labeled LEED.
I think you're correct, and our designer did point to the code is recent code, and the code requires efficiency already built into it. And so by building a new building to today's code, you're building a largely much higher efficiency building than you used to, and not necessarily seeing those huge differences between traditional and LEED certified.
Thanks. Yeah, I know from my own recently HVAC experience at home, they sort of explained all those different things to me and said, because you're putting in this super high efficient new system, even though it's not what I had originally intended, I am still like helping the planet. So this building is still helping the planet compared to, you know, some of our older stuff, I guess, is where I was kind of going. And then I wanted to ask, one of the things that really struck me in our visit to Creston was sitting with their chief and their CAO, who told us that throughout the build, their project manager also came up with all kinds of savings. Like one of the examples they gave was like a $4,000 light fixture in a hallway. And they went, well, you know, do you guys really want this $4,000 light? Because we can get you this awesome light that's $200 that will do all those things. So will we have that kind of ongoing as the project is going on?
Definitely, Mayor, through to council, we are looking at every line. We looked at their proposed prices for the microwave and the mini fridge and sent them links for acceptable appliances that would meet our needs that were not that expensive. So certainly through every phase of the project, our project managers will be looking for savings.
I do appreciate that attention to detail. Thank you. Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. At the end of the day, the main drivers here is the square footage, the structural steel, and those big items. If you don't reduce that, everything else is like just pocket change on the margin kind of savings. I get that. The reason for my pointed questions in the beginning was just to see like how much we can reduce our square footage, and I appreciate that the work has gone into doing that. Which reminds me, I had a question, Your Worship, but I forget what it was. It was something else not related to this. I'll come back. I'm sorry about that.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Councillor McKenzie.
Just one very quick question, and Councillor Audi Keller reminded me of it of our trip to Creston. And that was, I recall the discussion with the chief and at the time that the one thing that they lamented was not enough parking space. And I'm just wondering if, like, was that communicated from them to us, and have we grown a bit bigger? I recall this too early on in the discussion about the necessity for having space for everyone arriving and not having to jostle and figure it out, because time is often of the essence. And I just wonder if that communication happened back and forth. It does look sufficient, but
And not parking on the street in residential.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, Mayor, through to council, that we had fulsome discussion on parking needs and parking flow and site layout. And one thing you'll see there is we are proposing to fence that existing gravelled area. And we're not calling it additional parking, but essentially the point of that is to have a little bit of extra space that's off the pavement so that, you know, parked cars, say during practice, can move off of the paved area, which is prime training grounds, into that area, or there's plenty of sufficient area for snow storage there to be able to maintain all of the stalls in the winter. So that gray area shown on the site plan kind of acts as our buffer for overflow parking and snow storage, and it's quite large.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. I was going to wait till we're done the presentation, but I think we're on the last couple slides, are we not?
Manager Hill has a couple slides on the baseball diamond mitigation, and Director Burdett has multiple slides on the funding strategy. But this is a great discussion in terms of the facility. We got through the slides, yes.
Oh, very good. Well, I'll save some of my questions for when Bryn is up here, but I do appreciate that the pencils have been sharpened here. I'm glad that we're building just a fire hall, not everything for everybody. I think the firemen and firewomen will appreciate that as well. It's been said, you know, that this is going to be a generational facility, and that's the case. And, you know, so too will the bill for this. And I'm glad that we're putting this through the ringer. I think it's important for the people designing and the people watching these meetings and the taxpayer to be cognizant that we will put this through the ringer. I mean, some people roll their eyes as Councillor Ramadas goes through line by line and tries to look for these efficiencies. And yes, most of it doesn't go anywhere, but it's important that from top to bottom, people know that we will, that somebody will. So thanks for that, Councillor Ramadas. You know, I think this is taking a nice shape. I think it's great, except for, I mean, the carpenter in me hates the slopey wall on the west side. I just, why?
Precast concrete.
Yeah, so from a design standpoint and all those things, I'm quite happy with it. And I think it's important that we do pare this down. And just for those listening, I'm sure it'll come up later in the report, but I would definitely like to just have it reiterated for our own memory and for people's watching what the cutoff from municipal finance is for us having to have a referendum here. And I think that we should definitely touch on that before this is put to bed. But I'll wait till we get there in due course. Thank you.
Councillor Adia Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask Director, how much of the site footprint, like you mentioned that you carefully located the building on the site and it does totally appear that way. I just wondered how much sort of land is left over. That's an awkward question. How much space is left? You'll say it better than I can.
Mayor through to council, I wish I had that number for you. The size of the parcel that's remaining to the left of the facility, it's certainly something I could attempt to pull up here, but I don't have it available right now. It's certainly a parcel of developable size. We've done our best to stay away from the helipad, but contain the facility within a part of the parcel to ensure potential development of that other piece. For example, why we didn't build a single-story fire hall that would take up the whole site.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. If you could just let us know, I'm just thinking because this is generational, it would be kind of just nice to know, you know, what other options might be out there someday, not to scare taxpayers. I'm just thinking like 25 years from now, maybe.
Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. I had a question with regards to trades. It was not an intentional policy here to source trades just from Alberta and BC, and was it or?
Mayor through to council, no, it was not a policy. It was just to get a pulse on the likely local construction market that will be required to support the project.
So essentially, you really went after the lowest cost and highest quality labor available and not necessarily confining yourself to some geographical region.
Mayor through to council, correct. I would say at this stage, the labor is not secured. It's just an estimate based on quotes that were available in our region and in Kelowna and Alberta and whatnot. So it's the builder's best attempt at estimating the cost of the labor, but it's not secured. So I can't really speak to, you know, that how high quality it is or who it'll be, or they will go to market for each trade once we have the finalized design, and then the market will show who can supply the most competitive bids.
Further?
One last question before I shut up, Your Worship. I'm really looking forward to the later sections. But just while I was thinking about this, I was reminded by the podcast link that you sent, Councillor. They spoke a lot about, you know, the effect of aluminum and steel tariff and how certain things that are, you know, Canadian certified are still manufactured in the United States, and it's really hard to source it from locally, and I know there was a passage here where you mentioned that as a risk. Just can you give us a sense of how significant that risk is? Like, I mean, if you don't know, that's okay too, but is that going to have some kind of a risk that we haven't figured out at this point in time?
Mayor, through to council, I can give you a sense of how much our builder has estimated. And maybe I'll look at it while Director Burt is presenting, but I do have the actual dollar value that our builder has assigned, and they quantified their risks between like low, medium, and higher impact, to low impact being less than 1% of the total project budget. So yeah, we have that quantified and recommended by our builder a certain contingency to carry to address that based on the best of their knowledge at this time.
A bit of a congressional hearing.
CEO Voronowski was just saying that through our expression of interest process in the planning phase, we do have identified interested partners for housing and childcare on that site. And so I guess we could share the numbers of the size of the parcel and continue those discussions with interested partners.
And yeah, thank you for that, Ms. Weir. And just returning to that question about labor, and maybe this is asking you to speculate, presumably the builder, who has a lot of experience with fire halls regionally, would have received estimates from companies they've worked with before and they place some faith in.
Yes, so they provided a whole list of who they sent out for budgetary estimates, and they highlighted in certain trades, we have a concrete finisher that we've worked with here and they're the best, and we're asking them for a quote, and they'll still go to market, but they do have some preferred
They have some
suppliers
experience,
and experience with the labor market.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just one quick thing. So the extra space on the site wasn't so much that I was worried about the community partners, because one thing that Councillor Shoesmith brought up that I would also like to say, like we're doing this to have a purpose-built fire hall for our fire operations. So to me, that comes number one. So I just want to be really clear on that. No offense to any potential community partners or people that might want the space later, but I really want to make sure that if the community chooses to spend this money, that it's really basically about fire safety, firefighters, all that stuff. Like that's the important goal here.
Thank you.
Now I will hand it over to Manager Hill just to touch on the ball diamond mitigation budget that's been included in the project budget.
All right, good evening. For the ball diamond impacts, the mitigation that we were working on with the ball user groups, we have collaborated with the ball user groups on targeted facility improvements and the enhancements on the hospital field, as well as the large diamond at James White and the small diamond as well at James White. The proposed upgrades are about $95,000, focusing on the shale resurfacing, fencing improvements, infield preparation equipment, batting mats, and the annual top dressing of the diamonds. There we go. We met with the ball diamond groups on June 27th. There were two representatives who were able to make it. We were hoping for more, but it was one from the adult ball as well as one from the minor ball. To maintain their current registration, the levels that they have right now, despite the reduction in the field availability, their key recommendations included the upgrading of the shale resurfacing on all the ball diamonds. That was the first thing that came to mind. The second one was enhancing the storage capacity. They will now need to be playing at two different locations. So currently, the adult ball is playing at Prentice and the minor ball is playing at James White. They would be sharing both those spaces. They have a shed down at James White, but they would need a shed up at Prentice as well for the additional supplies. And then they're not going to be driving the equipment back and forth. So having that home base for the equipment at both sites was really important to them, as well as procuring additional equipment to support the concurrent use of multiple diamonds. We're going to see increased use at those spaces and ensuring that we're implementing safety upgrades, particularly improvements to the base anchors. Does council have any questions about the meetings with the ball reps?
Have you already, sorry, Manager Hill, have you already been turning over the shale at the hospital field, for example?
We were at the Sorella field. I'm not too sure if they're able to make it down to the hospital yet.
Okay.
The first one they did was the large field at James White, which made a big impact on the field. When they did went up to the Sorella field, it wasn't the same impact because it needs new shale. It was, what they found was they were getting a lot of big rocks coming up, which then was a lot of work to remove the rocks to ensure that it's a safe field for the users.
Thank you. Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. The speaker from earlier, who was part of minor ball, just mentioned that staying in James White Park for minor ball and keeping the equipment together in one location would be really beneficial. So we do have storage there for them now. It would be hospital field that we are looking to add. Just if I understood that right?
Yeah, and they would like to see that additional shed covered by this project because that would be an additional cost that they don't want to put on to their members of their clubs.
Okay, and they would be, I'm guessing, buying more equipment then as well, so they'd have duplicates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor McIsaac.
Sorry, just a clarification. So I understood from the speaker that they were concerned that they would only have one shed and they would have to be driving back and forth and that they were looking for a second shed. Is that what you suggested? Sorry, I misheard you then. Thank you.
Yeah, they minor ball wanted to kind of use the two fields in James White was how I understood him to say it, because it keeps their equipment together in that location. And then they would also need additional storage was how I understood it. Okay, perfect.
That is correct. They would need the additional storage. Yeah.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Just to help me wrap my head around the scale of the cost here, what size shed do they require? Like is it 10 by 10, 10 by 20, 5, but like what are we talking about here?
We have a community shed program already, and the minor ball has accessed that at the James White. So they would like to get another shed up at the hospital field. I believe it's about a 10 by 10, but they were meeting with the groups. They would be able to share both the adult and the minor ball in that one location because they'd also be sharing the other location as well. They were also interested in accessing, we have a community bin program as well for some of the smaller equipment, and they would like, that's included in the approximately $95,000 was covering the cost of them having the bins and covering the rentals as well for that additional storage need.
Thank you.
Sorry, what's the community bin program? Is that like a little lockable?
Yeah, so we have small green bins that are lockable. I know the pickleball is using one right now, and that would be suitable for like the baseball mats and smaller equipment, whereas the larger equipment would be in the shed.
Okay, there's one on the tennis courts. Is that a?
Yeah, that's the green
okay.
bin.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just curious, I was talking to our speaker, Brad, but I don't know his last name, and
Cox.
Brad Cox. There you go. Thank you very much. Mr. Cox had said that a lot of the fields that he's seen, and I'm looking at one right now, has a lot more green space than shale. And you know, you think about like I've been out to the fields here and I've had to cover one up, and there is a lot of shale there and very little grass on the infield. And is there an opportunity for us to change that and then reduce the amount of shale that we need, like by putting in grass in that area? Because it's, number one, it's really, really dirty when you fall in it, like a teacher does sometimes, but it's also softer too, right? So it's I'm just curious about that, like the
Like,
grass
sorry.
component.
Grass infield.
Yeah, grass
Okay.
infield versus a shale
Yeah.
infield. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to understand.
It's something that we can explore. Enhancing the shale was what came from the adult and the minor vol groups. But it's something we could look into. I don't have costs on that right now.
No, fair enough. And has there been any expressed desire for a grass infield, or they're
No,
used
that has
to-
not come up in
Yeah,
discussion.
they're used to shale, play on the shale. They're perfectly happy to continue.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
That's not what Mr. Cox said.
No,
Out
fair enough.
there.
Anything else for Manager Hill? Councillor Ade Kelly?
I was joking about it the other night, but seriously, would Canoe have shale? Is that something that we can source?
I actually did ask the members from Canoe that, Councillor Ade Kelly, and they don't do shale, but they have, you're not the first one to ask, so they may explore it in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Manager Hill.
All right.
Before Director Burdick comes up, I thought I would provide some additional light to Councillor Ramadas's question about material supply risks. So they've identified the risk for because the facility is largely precast concrete, they have that as low risk, low probability of concerns with material supply. They have the structural steel supply as a medium risk, but since the value of that on the project is lower than, say, a steel frame facility, then the dollar amount assigned to the structural steel risk is actually quite low. So.
Sorry, your
No.
microphone?
Sorry, Your Worship.
No.
Aluminum content is not that much.
Hasn't been identified as a risk.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Director Burdick, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Weir. Thank you, Ms. Hill. Hello, Council. There have been two very recent and very major changes in the world of funding opportunities for municipal large capital projects. And both of those have their own timing implications, and they're all interwoven with this project. And so the last couple of weeks, I've spent a lot of time on the phone with a lot of people trying to understand it to the best of my ability so that I can communicate this to you also to the best of my ability. So the proposed funding strategy in the report includes a mixture of a grant from the Strategic Priorities Fund, a contribution from the Regional District of East Kootenay as it's defined in our fire service agreement for providing fire service at the ski hill. The Regional District, I should say we're still in talks with them, working on a new funding agreement, but they have been open to this increase initially. But they've expressed that they'd rather include it as part of the borrowing for the project and contribute to the loan instead of an upfront contribution, which is fair because it's a much larger increase than the original agreement.
Sorry, Mr. Burdick, given that we provide them with ongoing service in Area A, do they provide any operating funding in subsequent years for the life of the facility?
So yes, the amount that they contribute to us every year is based on our operating budget for the fire department.
Okay.
So because that will go up, the amount that we request from them every year will also go up.
Thank you.
And then there's also the clause in the agreement for their contribution to a new fire hall.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And then there's use of reserves of $4 million and then borrowing of 3.5 million. That 3.5 million does assume a successful Strategic Priorities Fund, SPF, grant application of $7 million. If successful, there's annual payments on that loan of $206,000, which equates to roughly a 2.01% tax increase using 2025 figures. If it's not successful, the annual payments on a loan would be $617,000, which would be a 6.02% tax increase. But I do have a couple of slides on that grant opportunity. So the Strategic Priorities Fund, or SPF, is part of the Canada Community Building Fund. It's the application-based grant portion of that program. The maximum amount available per project is $7 million. It has funded fire halls in the past. Burns Lake, as an example, received $6 million in 2022 for their fire hall, which was the maximum amount available at that time. Intakes for this program are historically only open every 2 or 3 years. The last time this was open was in 2022. We did meet at a leadership level and review our other large projects for viability with this fund, as you can only submit one application per intake period. And the fire hall was the clear winner in terms of the approved type of expenditures under this program, the timing of the fire hall project, and really it was just best suited for this funding stream out of all our projects on our docket. Staff has mentioned this lightly in previous council meetings, hoping that it would be open in time for this fire hall project, and that the timing of the funding stream would line up. And by some stroke of luck, it turns out it does line up very nicely with this project. Staff attended a session put on by UBCM in Cranbrook in June. UBCM are the administrators of the SPF program on behalf of the province. The only part of our project that didn't line up perfectly is the remaining funding for the project. Specifically, if we were to hold a referendum in October, this would be after the September 12th SPF application deadline. UBM specifically said that they like to see that we have the remainder of the funding secured for the project, or they view the project as risky. They don't want to grant funding to a project that doesn't happen, which then very much impacts the likelihood of a successful application. And so at this point, I need to make a correction to a sentence that was in the report. And it's important to note that this fund only opened in late May with no advance warning. So we've been learning everything we can, as I said, in the last 5 weeks. And I've been on the phone a lot with UBCM and MFA, who ultimately grants the loan, trying to get as much info as I can. And so there's a sentence in your report that says staff is confident that with open lines of communication, we could work with UBCM around a referendum being after the application deadline, but before they announce successful applicants. Staff no longer feels confident about this. UBCM specifically told us that applications are considered final and can't be amended after the fact with additional information. So to be clear, if there is a referendum in October, I would say we are very unlikely to get this grant. Which brings us to another option to secure the rest of the funds, which is the other major change that was just announced 2 weeks ago, and it's approval-free borrowing. The province recently increased the approval-free borrowing capacity for municipalities. They did this because the Minister of Municipal Affairs said, and I quote, "Municipalities told us that outdated borrowing thresholds were slowing down their ability to deliver the infrastructure people count on," end quote. I do have another correction to a number that was published in your report. Originally, when I was reading this news release, it talked of doubling the borrowing capacity, which I took to mean doubling the end result of the calculation. After diving in more deeply and discussing with colleagues and learning exactly how this new calculation works, I learned that it actually is doubling one of the variables in the calculation, not the end result. So the old formula, just for your reference, was 5% of revenue less our current annual payments. The new formula is 10% of revenue less our current annual payments. So in the report, I doubled our capacity from 269,000 to 538, which would be a total loan amount of 9.23 million. But because I was understanding the formula incorrectly, our new capacity under this change is $1.4 million worth of annual payments, which amounts to a loan value of $23.8 million with current interest rates. Councillor Ahmed?
Councillor Ahmed?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to size this number for my own understanding, CFO, and also for the community to understand what this actually means. $1.3 million is the interest payment per year, correct? In this scenario?
It's our annual payment, so it includes principal and interest.
And
yes.
interest.
Yeah.
Can you remind myself and the folks who might be listening here, what's one line item that is $1.3 million worth of expenditure in a year? I'm assuming snow removal is about $1 million. Running the pool is $1.5 million.
Yeah, storm removal is a good example. It's about 1.2. The fire department operating budget as it is now is 2 million. But that's just, that 1.4 up there is our capacity. That's not what this loan will be.
If you may. Your
Further?
Worship. Yeah, just wanted to size this. People need to be reminded that if there is that $600,000 worth of payment scenario, that would be like spending half of your snow removal budget into interest payment every year for the next however many years.
30 years.
30 years of continuous every year payment that is equivalent to half of our snow removal budget.
Yeah, if we're not successful in our SPS application. If we are, the loan payment would be 200,000.
If we are.
Councillor Oddie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. So just so I've really understood, CFO, 23.8 million is the most we can borrow, period, for everything?
No, that's the most we can borrow approval free.
Approval free. Because forgive me, but I'm thinking about wastewater. I'm thinking about CNL right of way. I'm thinking about what if we aren't successful in grants, because, you know, I know staff does a fabulous job of the grants. So I don't want the community to think that we don't get these grants because the job wasn't done well. It's just sometimes there's a lot of competition and not that much money and you don't get the grant. Just similar to Ready Grants, we can't give everybody money that doesn't exist. So we could still, because we're looking at our wastewater system, obviously, right? And I believe 18 million was one of the figures with more to come. So we could still have borrowing capacity. So let's say 23.8 million is our approval limit, and we use, let's say, the 15 million on this. Does that mean then we have to go to referendum for the sewer?
That's a good question, Councillor Oddie Kelly. Well, first of all, our total borrowing capacity is about 5.4 million of annual payments. Our current annual payments are 818, 600K of which comes off the books next year, because that was our short-term loan for our ops facility. So let's say, for argument's sake, we are successful in the SPF grant. We would then now have a loan of 212,000 on top of the 218 that we're going to have in 2026. So that would be 418. So then that would leave roughly $1 million still of approval-free borrowing capacity, which I don't have the total loan value offhand. It'd be about $17–18 million of loan value, but actual borrowing capacity would still be quite a bit larger than that. So any project over 17 that we would have to borrow more than $17–18 million for would require voter approval.
So theoretically, without grants, with the CNL costing that we got, the current sewer costing, plus we have to add sewer costing and the fire hall, 23.8 million is our maximum that doesn't require referendum. Okay.
That's correct, which as of 3 weeks ago was significantly lower than that too.
Yeah.
So to summarize all of those numbers though, the city of Fernie does have the approval-free borrowing limit to take on a loan of this size without going to referendum, whether we get the SPF grant or not. Also in discussions with UBCM about this option, they said that a council resolution authorizing approval-free borrowing and an expectation of when we'd get ultimate approval from the MFA, which just takes time because the borrowing bylaw we submit to the province and they have it for 6 or 8 weeks. And we get it back, council adopts the bylaw. There's a month-long quashing period. And then we do another bylaw for our temporary borrowing. And then we submit an application to the MFA, which there's no reason for them to deny it, but it just takes time. So, so as long as we communicated as of September 12th, when roughly we expect to get approval from the MFA, which if we follow our current timeline would be November or December, would be enough for them to be satisfied that we have funding secured for the rest of this project.
So, sorry, Mr. Burdett, just for clarity, based on what you said, if we advance approval for free borrowing and are able to provide surety to UBCM by September 12th, we stand a reasonable chance of getting the $7 million additional funding. If we miss that deadline, if we go to referendum and it happens in October, we stand no chance of getting that funding.
That's essentially correct. Neither of those are guarantees.
Understood. Yeah.
I don't know for certain that they would deny our application, but based on what they've told me, they would view it as a risky one.
Yeah.
And I don't know for certain that they would approve our application, but what I do know is that if
it improves our chances,
if approval-free borrowing is advanced, it times all aspects of this project really nicely with that SPF grant. And again, it's just by a stroke of good fortune. We've been working on this project for over a year.
Yeah.
And it just so happened they announced that intake 5 weeks ago, and it's only open for 3 months. And there's still quite a bit of work to get everything lined up nicely for it. But the way the nice people from UBCM were speaking in Cranbrook, you know, they really want to give this money to municipalities because, for one, they've been advocating on municipalities' behalf to the federal government that they would like to see this fund increased. But the response back has been that, well, you're not spending what we're giving you. And, you know, there's the other half of the Canada Community Building Fund, which is the amount we get every year, which has been going into our reserve. And UBCM also said that they would like to see applications using that part of your funding too, which
as part of our strategy.
Funding strategy depletes that reserve so that they can advocate better on our behalf. But the reason we're not spending it, obviously, is that things are getting more expensive. And so it is hard. But you're right. If there's a referendum, I would say most of the time we lose out on this funding stream. And if it's approval for free borrowing, I feel quite confident about this funding stream.
Thank you.
Question.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Just curious, how big is the fund? Do we know how big that fund is for, I mean, is it $700 million or something like that?
Thanks, Councillor Nixon. I'll get that answer for you very shortly. The CEO is looking it up. Also, I apologize for chairing the meeting, Mr. Mayor.
Not at all. You're doing a great job. Councillor Adi Kelly, did you have your hand up?
I just want to take us a little bit backwards too, and I know I keep talking about Creston, but this being my fire hall building buddies that I was able to speak to, one of the things that Creston did with surrounding area was said, we're providing you with fire protection, we're building this fire hall, we have professional service, we expect contributions from outside our boundaries to equal those inside our boundaries.
Yeah, by assessed value.
By assessed value. So I just want to point that out because I think that's really important. I think from what I understand, and Chief can correct me if I'm wrong, our firefighters looking after those properties is a significant benefit to those homeowners in terms of insurance and other costs. And I know Chief has gone to bat for them for insurance costs. So I think it's fair that everybody that gets fire protection from Fernie pays for it based on their assessed values.
Any comments, Mr. Burdett, before I go to Councillor Schussman?
I do have a comment. The formula that decides how much funding they provide does factor in assessed value. The problem is that Fernie's assessed value is also quite high. So it's not, you know, I understand what you're saying, but we also have our own value working against us in that equation for sure.
Just further,
Yeah.
that was further also to his worship's question about ongoing. Like, this is your contribution towards the new build, but what about also the ongoing costs of running a fire hall?
Yeah, and I mentioned this earlier, but the other variable in the equation that determines how much they pay is the fire hall's operating budget period. So when that goes up, their amount that they contribute goes up as well.
Councillor Shoesman?
I would just like to say absolutely everything Councillor Odia Kelly just said, just to second that. Like, there's fully support what she had to say there.
Thank you. Before I go to you, Councillor Ramirez, I'm going to ask if I can get a resolution to go past 10 o'clock. Councillor Ramirez, moved by Councillor Ramirez, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. I beat you to it. Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. And yeah, if clapping at council was allowed, I would have clapped 2 minutes ago. One question, CFO, I might be, again, jumping the gun here a little bit. On July 15th, what exactly are you going to ask from the council?
That's a good question, Councillor Ramirez. So the ask next week will be to give first 3 readings to loan authorization bylaw, which will then be submitted to the inspector of municipalities or the province in that very next day, July 16th, and they'll have 6 to 8 weeks to approve that. That timeline initially was driven by a referendum in October. We were just working back from that date, which was then, you know, impacting spring construction. And we've had discussion about whether we still need this on July 15th. And I think the argument is that we do, so that when we submit our application to the SPF in September, we'll have a more firm and accurate date to give them in terms of when we expect MFA approval for a loan. So we did talk about not, you know, pushing next week's meeting, but ultimately I think it strengthens our application still to keep this timeline. Because if we have that authorization bylaw back by mid-September, we'll be able to say that you know, we've got 1 step left and it's the MFA.
Councillor McIsaac?
Thanks, Your Worship. Thinking that next week is committee of the whole, is there a special meeting being called? Did I just miss that? That there's been a special meeting called next week?
It hasn't been posted yet.
Okay, we only need 24 hours? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well then no.
Thank you. Councillor Ramirez?
Sorry, Worship, I'm still unclear, CFO, apologize. So really, you're going to ask from us, either do you want to go approval-free borrowing or not? That's what you're going to be
Certainly
asking
part
from
of the
us.
question, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Your Worship?
That will be part of the question, for sure.
Part of the question, or that's the only question that's going to be asked?
I mean, the official resolution will be to give first 3 readings, but staff's recommendation will be to go via approval-free borrowing route, which is different from a month ago because of these 2 major things that have changed recently.
Yeah.
I do have another slide that actually kind of talks about the pros and cons of approval-free borrowing, if it's okay to move on.
Okay.
So pros, as I just mentioned, lines up this project quite perfectly with the intake period for the SPF. Oh, I'm sorry. To answer your question, Councillor Nixon, the total funding amount with this intake available is 125 million for all municipalities in BC outside of Metro Vancouver. And while that doesn't seem like a lot, which was my first thought when I heard it when I was in Cranbrook, I asked the question then, how many projects received the maximum amount in 2022, the last funding? And the answer I got was 4 or 5. And you can see why, like you need a lot of luck to line up perfectly
Yeah.
to get a project of this size through that grant program. So again, it lines up perfectly with the intake period for the SPF. It also allows staff to better support construction beginning in 2026. And by that, I mean just faster timelines and improved sequencing for everything else that needs to be completed, rezoning, the right of reverter covenant, instead of waiting until October and then kind of scrambling for spring construction start, depending on the outcome of a referendum. It also provides more cost certainty on this project. If referendum fails, in all likelihood, this project only gets more expensive. Staff also received confirmation that a referendum is not a strict requirement to address the right of reverter covenant on the property. The most obvious downside to approval-free borrowing is that there is a sizable part of the community that is expecting a referendum. And to be honest, that was staff's expectation as well, even as short as a month ago. But again, the very recent changes in both this SPF intake and the recent changes to legislation around borrowing has had a significant impact on the funding strategy. So again, staff does intend to recommend proceeding with approval-free borrowing at the July 15th meeting of council. So that said, I'm happy to entertain more questions.
Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. So CFO, just so I'm clearly understanding, we would still advance borrowing for the full amount because we can't assume we're getting the grant, right? Did I get that right?
That's right. The borrowing bylaw will be in the amount of about 11.9 million, which includes 7 million for the grant, 3.5 for our portion if we're successful with the grant, and 1.4 for the regional district's portion.
Okay, so assuming that, just bad news, we don't get the grant, we would still have the funding. And can you just explain, just in case folks don't understand, what right of reverter means?
Mr. Boranowski.
Thank you. It is a covenant on the property for its future use in the interest of Shell. And so we've been throughout the process discussing should council advance the project, what is the trigger for amending that on this property? And they have confirmed that it is council's endorsement of a fully funded project and advancing the fire hall that is their trigger. And so upon that resolution, they would then advance the process on their side.
So if you don't mind, in layman's terms, that means Shell would say, we're okay with the change of use of Prentice Park to use it for a fire hall.
Shell's specific language is they have no position on the use and that council's decision and determination will drive what they're willing to do.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Oh, Councillor Smith. Sorry, I did have you on the list. Apologies. It's been that kind of night.
No worries, Mayor Milligan. Thank you. Thank you, Director Pritt. This is really good. This presented course of action seems very prudent. It's quite fortuitous this has all happened, I guess. It's interesting to me, right? I mean, there's $7 million available from higher up here. And we, as a town and probably as a council, we're probably going to allow that to drive our decision-making on this. We'd be stupid not to. And it's interesting because, it's the golden rule. The guy with the gold makes the rules. This is driving our policy. This is driving what we're going to do. We're probably, can't speak for everybody at the table on how they'll vote, but we'll probably wind up without a referendum in order to get that money. And in essence, our citizens, what they'll see is they'll see that we were going to come asking them, and now we're not because the government up above us has made a decision. And it's interesting to me, had that $7 million stayed parked in a taxpayer's pocket, that would be the person we would be asking what to do from, because the money that drives our decisions. And now it's got us, I don't know how the rest of you feel about this, but this is quite the bind. On one hand, I have integrity, and on the other, I have prudence. And I really do feel early on in this process, more than a year ago, I think we made some mistakes, and I think that it wasn't very popular, and I think people were expecting a chance to voice that. And now, should things proceed as they're likely to, I mean, they'll be cut out of that. And I think that's deeply regrettable. And none of this is to impugn or criticize anything here in this report or what anybody's done. This is clearly, you know, this is the best path forward financially that you're presenting us with. Makes a lot of sense. So thanks for that, but I just felt I wanted to say how I view this and how I feel about this. It's got us in quite a bind, or me at least.
I appreciate your perspective, Councillor, but I'm not sure how you meant it, but I'm not sure I agree with your assessment on one hand prudence and the other hand integrity, because I think we're here to make the best decisions for this community. And as Mr. Burgess has pointed out, things have lined up in a way nobody could have foreseen. And we have been 46 years in this community without a permanent fire hall. If that's acceptable to anyone, that's, to me, I find that ridiculous. That is just unacceptable. And now things have lined up so that we can proceed. And for me, the greater integrity is doing the right thing for this community. And that's where my thoughts land on this one. Sorry, Mr. Birdie, you were going to say something?
Oh, just to say that I understand where Councillor Shoesmith is coming from, which is why it was listed as a con to approval free borrowing.
Oh, I don't want for a moment to minimize that.
Yeah.
That there is an expectation, and I know there will be blowback if there's a decision that doesn't meet that expectation.
And the other point I wanted to make is that we've had lots of discussions about our major funding stream, our major sources of revenue as a municipality. One is taxation, the other are these grants. And again, this is timed very nicely for this.
Yeah, and it's taxpayer money that we will bring back to this community, and it will take the burden off our local taxpayer. In fact, it's money they've already paid, and we'll just bring it back to advance a project in our community. Sorry.
If there's nothing else, we have one more slide. There are a lot of positives to arriving at this stage in the project. So Ms. Weir has one more slide just to close out the presentation. Somewhere. Apologies, I made a mess up here.
Here it is. Thank you. We had just discussed and wanted to button up this extensive presentation sort of on a highlight in terms of that the staff report in front of you has outlined a design and budget for a new fire hall that addresses the operational needs of our fire and emergency services department and the long-term interests of our community. And our design that we're recommending prioritizes functionality and safety with a focus on cost containment and the ability to enhance emergency response capabilities and support our modern firefighting operations. And so the budget in front of you includes all the project costs and has been developed with input from our experienced builder and design team and sub-trades, and worked diligently to ensure accuracy and transparency that's available at this stage. And we just wanted to advocate that should council endorse this plan, there is a detailed plan in place to progress through detailed design, funding, construction, and highlight that, construction of a fire hall is targeted for spring 2026, and we could have a new fire hall serving our community by 2027. So just wanted to highlight some of what we feel are positive outcomes of the work to date.
Thank you for that. Ms. Weir. And the the fact that we could potentially have a fire hall in 2027, I mean, that's impressive. And is that largely because of the precast tilt up? Like, is it a quick assembly?
Yes,
Yeah.
It's an expedited construction schedule.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reminis.
Just one small thought that I wanted to convey to the staff here, Your Worship. Again, at the end of the day, whatever decision we make is based on our, internal political philosophy and, what we think we are hearing from the citizens and all those things. Till now, what I have seen through the night has been super impressive. It's job well done. Like it's whatever decision we take is not a reflection of staff's effort. It's purely a political body that's making political decision. So I just wanted you guys to know that.
Other comments, questions? Seeing none, I want to, reflect on or echo Councillor Ramadas's comments just now. Like this has been an excellent presentation. The level of detail and knowledge presented this evening has been super impressive and super informative. And, I'm very grateful for the work that's been done to date. So thank you. Look forward to seeing the next piece of work. I was going to say hurdle, but I'll say next piece of work. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Nixon.
Sorry about that. Just thanks, Mayor Milligan. When do we get our new fire truck though?
Good question.
Okay, thank you.
One tiny question about the new fire truck. Do we have to worry about tariffs on the new fire truck?
And for those at home who didn't hear the answer, the truck will be here at 2026 and tariffs are yet undetermined, the impact.
And can we add that we did get a very good price on that fire truck?
We did, yeah. Well, thank you all. So moving on to item 11.1. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll need a mover and a seconder that council return to the regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Audie Kelly, seconded by Councillor Shoesmith. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 11.1, evolution. Oh, I really hate that word. Charge Inc. lease execution report from our CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do believe they use evolution.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that's not watching.
I won't make a comment on my feelings. Thank you, Mayor and Council. A really brief report, only a few more slides than Ms. Weir's presentation here, about the proposed lease at the skate park to establish fast chargers with evolution. Staff are recommending the council endorse the attached lease with Evolution Charge Incorporated for the purpose of establishing a EV charging station at the Fernie Skate Park, and that the mayor and corporate officer execute the lease once public notice has been provided. Very, very briefly, council will recall there was a previous application. This is indeed the second application, although to a different stream, to fund and install fast EV chargers at the skate park. On May 21st, 2025, council provided a resolution that A, council provide a letter of endorsement permitting the project to advance and direct staff to advance the agreements with the proponent, such that if funding is not successful, it be terminated immediately. We've now worked with legal counsel and the proponent to complete that work, and their grant application is in based on that letter of endorsement and confirmation that this report is coming forward to council. As noted, we developed it with both our legal counsel and Evolution based on their proposal. It is for a 20-year term to justify the investment on the site. However, there is both a general mutually acceptable cancellation or termination clause within the agreement, and also automatic termination should they not install EV chargers before 2026, before July 1st of 2026. We can mutually extend that, but that allows for that grant to be announced and for them to be able to construct in the spring and then become operational. Or if they're unsuccessful, the lease becomes terminated because they can't build the chargers. It does formalize the proposal that was endorsed by council, which is a 10% share of session revenues. We set a minimum of $5,500 per year, increasing by 3% per year. That's based on their bare minimum modeling, but that also provides us an assurance of revenues in exchange for that land that allows us to fund the snow clearing and if there's some additional incremental costs related to ongoing maintenance. Did circulate the considerations so that staff are aware. And the feedback was we were able to accommodate the additional snow clearing within that new funding envelope. Should they fail to have session revenues or provide that funding, again, the lease would terminate. Other than that, I'm happy to answer further questions that council may have. And again, the recommendation is as read at the beginning of the presentation and is in the report. Thank you.
Questions from council? Seems pretty straightforward. I'll ask our corporate officer to read the recommendation.
Your worship, staff recommendation is that council endorse the attached lease with Evolution Charge Incorporated for the purposes of establishing an EV charging station at the Fernie Skate Park, and that the mayor and corporate officer, execute the lease once public notice has been provided.
Moved by Councillor McIsaac, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. And then the final item was in correspondence, in which the Elk Valley Pride Festival has asked for in-kind requests consistent with their previous asks. And I don't know, I'll turn to staff if there's any comment from staff to inform this. It seemed, again, pretty straightforward, but okay, seeing none. Oh.
Feeling left out. So in the RMI or RDS report that council endorsed, the in-kind donation is included in that anyways.
Okay.
This is a bit redundant in that regard, but the flag request within that is relevant.
Right, because the flag, we now have a flag policy, we would have to.
Council would
provide direction.
Approve, yeah.
Okay. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. The only question I had was, I was a little bit confused about the reference to the Heritage Canada grant in there, and that the wording was that they did not apply for this grant, but would like to request the same in-kind support the city of Fernie has provided previously as the confirmed municipal support portion of the Heritage Canada application. So is that, are they saying they're now going to apply for the grant based on that amount? Is that, like, I don't understand what they're saying.
I actually had a conversation with Ms. Baker at Council Cafe, and she said, no, it's meant to say essentially just the same in-kind commitment as though they had applied for the grant.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks.
Yeah, I had actually the same question.
So they're not asking for additional, your worship,
No,
they're just
just the
asking for
same.
the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have an recommendation. Oh, sorry.
I was just trying to move the.
Oh, okay. Well, the motion is quite specific. So that council approves the flying of the Progress Pride flag at City Hall throughout the week of September 15th, 2025 to September 22nd, 2025. Moved by Councillor Ramirez, seconded by Councillor Adia Kelly. Any discussion? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. If you're willing to waive your council reports, given the time, and anyone who's stayed with us this long, unless there's something absolutely burning that somebody wants to say. Yeah, Councillor Ramirez.
I just wanted to make a comment about Canada Day. I think
thank you. Yeah.
Councillor McIsaac and several others actually made that comment already, but I have to say, I've lived in Fernie since 2010. Now it's my 16th year here. And I think this was the best Canada Day that we've had so far. So congratulations to everyone that worked hard. Councillor Shoesmith, I know you worked in the background, busting your, wrong end there. So thank you for your effort there.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Adia Kelly.
Yeah, I just wanted to say similar thanks to all of the participants, the clubs, including my Rotary Club. Had to say that. Lions, 3,300, everybody was fantastic. Gave out 1,000 cupcakes in a really short period of time. Hey, Councillor Ramirez, like really fast.
Yeah.
Thanks to Mayor Milligan and Counselor Nixon for going in the dunk tank. You guys were brave.
That was good fun,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that I thought it was fabulous. And just, it was mentioned to me, and I wanted to share it with you by someone I consider an esteemed citizen, that it would be maybe really nice to put out a call for new Canadians who might wish to be recognized, so that we can say on Canada Day or other occasions, these folks became new Canadians. And I thought that was a really nice thought.
Yeah. Oh, well, Councillor Shoesmith will make a mental note for the committee in the future. But I want to echo that. So thank you, Councillor Ramirez, for raising that, because that was the first item on my mayor's report was I had a friend in town who grew up here as well, and none of us could remember as impressive a Canada Day in this community, even as a child. Like I remember Canada Days, but the way that was set up was fantastic. And the concentration of it downtown on City Hall grounds with the shade and the food trucks, and it was exceptional. So kudos to everyone involved, including our staff who supported that. So it was, great thing. Yeah. Councillor Ramirez?
I think there's one thing that we can still add, Your Worship, just fireworks of some sort, drone fireworks. That's the only thing that is missing. If we can add that, icing on the cake.
Confetti?
Yeah, something. Yeah.
Water soluble confetti. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. I wasn't going to say too much, but carefully with what you wish for with stuff. I mean, just look up Balloon Fest as a cautionary tale. We don't want to be them. Confetti could be dangerous. No, but I'd like to, just give a shout out to a lot of people. I got to work with, Bill Pittman, Cindy Pearson, Corinne Hoopmer, a lot of really, really good powerhouses in the various charities that really came and put that on. What I would also like is the dunk tank chairman to thank councillors Nixon and yourself and the fire chief over there. You guys really helped make that fun, as did the cops. And thank you for the extra ice, Councillor Nixon. It was getting a little low by the time I was in there. It was an ice touch. Anyways, yeah, thanks. The people who put that on, they were really, really great people. Yeah. And I think they're pretty happy with it right now, and they should be.
We need a bit more gender diversity in the dunk tank, just saying.
That's true. That is true. Although the police we had a female officer and a male officer hopping. Oh yeah, Officer Brad and Officer Emily. They were a lot of fun.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. And with that, I will adjourn the July 8th, 2025 regular meeting at 10:11 p.m. And thank you, Councillor Hamilton, for sticking with us through that